Across deserts, plains and islands, entire civilizations once flourished, leaving behind cities, monuments and intricate artifacts that speak of ingenuity and mastery, and then vanished, leaving questions that echo through history. From the labyrinthine palaces of Crete to sunken plazas in the coastal valleys of Peru, from vast settlements burned and abandoned on the plains of Eastern Europe to rings of stones aligned with the stars in Egypt's arid expanses, the traces of these peoples endure like whispers frozen in time. As we trace the remnants of their architecture, art and ritual, the investigation reveals not only the ingenuity of vanished societies, but also the mysteries of their disappearance. In this exploration, each discovery becomes a window into worlds that thrived, innovated, and ultimately receded, leaving the stones, the ashes, and the silence to tell their stories. The forgotten builders of Catal Hoyuk. In the sunlit plains of central Anatolia, where the modern city of Konya now stands, lie the remains of one of the world's earliest known cities, built by the Catal Hoyuk civilization. Long before Egypt's first dynasties or the rise of Sumer, this society thrived in the region around 7,500 BCE. Its people built tightly packed houses from mud brick, each pressed against the next like cells in a living organism. From above, the settlement would have resembled a vast honeycomb of clay and ash, spreading across the plain with no streets or open courtyards. Archaeologists would later name it Catal Hoyuk, meaning forked mound in Turkish, though its ancient builders left no record of what they called it, or why they abandoned it. The first discovery occurred in 1958, when British archaeologist James Mellart uncovered fragments of painted walls, human burials beneath floors, and artifacts far too complex for their supposed age. The more he excavated, the deeper the mystery grew. Here was a settlement not of scattered huts, but of dense architecture and communal planning, yet with no palaces, temples or fortifications. Each house stood alike, entered through its roof by ladder, and each contained the remains of multiple generations interred beneath its floorboards. Mellart realized he was staring at a society that had achieved remarkable sophistication at a time when most of humanity still wandered the earth. The people of Catal Hoyuk lived without streets. Movement occurred across rooftops, where daily life unfolded under the open sky. Smoke rose from dozens of clay ovens, mingling with the scent of burnt reeds and cooking grain. Below, walls were plastered and painted with ochre scenes, hunters pursuing wild cattle, vultures hovering above headless figures, women surrounded by geometric patterns. These murals, preserved under layers of ash and dust, remain among the earliest examples of human symbolic art. Yet their meaning, much like the identity of the painters, remains unknown. In many homes, shrines were hidden among domestic spaces. Bulls' horns jutted from walls beside sculpted goddesses of clay, their rounded forms emerging from white plaster like figures halfway between myth and life. Some rooms contained skulls coated in plaster, reshaped into lifelike masks with shells for eyes. Archaeologists debate whether these belong to ancestors revered or enemies defeated. What is certain is that the people of Catal Hoyuk lived among their dead, sleeping above the bones of parents and children, surrounded by images of fertility, death, and renewal. The settlement's survival depended on the river systems that once wound through the Konya Plain. Its inhabitants farmed wheat and barley, herded sheep and goats, and gathered obsidian from nearby volcanoes, which they shaped into glistening blades and traded across vast distances. Such trade networks suggest a culture far more connected than once imagined. Obsidian from Catal Hoyuk has been found hundreds of kilometers away, proving that this community participated in early systems of exchange long before formal trade routes existed. Yet, despite their sophistication, no evidence of kingship or hierarchy has ever been found. No grand tombs, no palaces, no monuments proclaiming power. Daily life was communal and cyclical. When a house grew old, its walls were torn down and rebuilt on the same foundation, creating layers that rose higher with every generation. Over time, the entire city became a mound of its own making, a living archive of centuries of continuous occupation. The pattern of construction suggests a society ruled by tradition rather than command, guided by shared rituals and unspoken order. In this sense, Catal Hoyuk may represent one of the few examples of a truly egalitarian urban world. And yet, something happened. Around 6,400 BCE, the settlement began to shrink. Houses were abandoned, walls crumbled, and the great mound slowly emptied of life. There are no signs of invasion, no firestorm of war, no evidence of mass disease. The people have drifted away, perhaps drawn to smaller communities forming in the surrounding plain. Some theories suggest environmental change, shifting river channels or overuse of farmland, but no single cause explains the complete abandonment of a city that had endured for more than a millennium. Excavations reveal the final phase of occupation as strangely subdued. The art becomes simpler, the walls less decorated. Burials continue, but the elaborate skull rituals fade. The once vivid symbols of life and death grow quiet, as if the people themselves were losing faith in the meaning that had bound them together. When the last families left, they sealed their rooftops and filled their homes with earth, leaving everything entombed in perfect stillness. The silence that followed lasted thousands of years. Today, the mound of Catal Hoyuk rises modestly above the plains, a layered hill of dust and memory. Beneath its surface lie the traces of more than 2,000 buildings, each stacked upon the next like pages in an unfinished story. Scientists still sift through its remains, uncovering new fragments of wall paintings and bone tools. Still, the greater mystery persists: how such a complex connected society could emerge so early, thrive so long, and disappear without leaving even a legend behind. Some call Catal Hoyuk the first city, while others consider it the first symbol of human unity before the advent of division. Yet beneath every excavation trench lies the same unanswered question: why did the people who built one of the world's earliest civilizations choose to walk away from it? And when the last roof closed over the previous empty home, only the dust remained to remember their name. The vanished people of Nabta Playa. At the far edge of Egypt's western desert, where the dunes swallow the horizon, the ground is broken by a ring of stones that no wind has moved for 7,000 years. The landscape around it is lifeless now, a vast plain of gravel and salt stretching beneath a heat that distorts the air. There is no sound but the wind and no trace of the water that once covered this place. Yet the arrangement of these stones, measured, deliberate, and ancient beyond reckoning, suggests that the people of Nabta Playa once watched the heavens here, long before the first pharaoh rose beside the Nile. Once this was not a desert but water, a great seasonal lake that drew nomadic herders from across the Sahara, its shores alive with life and ritual. During the early Holocene, monsoon rains swept northward, filling basins like Nabta Playa and turning the region into a green corridor. Grasses, gazelle, and cattle flourished beside the lake's shifting edge. Families built temporary camps on the dunes, marked by hearths and fragments of pottery. Archaeologists have traced these layers of occupation to nearly 9,000 years ago, when this now barren plain was a fertile refuge in a warming world. Here, in the rhythm of returning rains, a small community began to look upward, to the stars that govern the seasons of their survival. Amid this vanished lakebed, a circle of megaliths rises in quiet precision, aligned to the midsummer sun in a pattern older than Stonehenge. The stones are rough, quarried from nearby sandstone ridges, but their placement reveals an understanding of celestial cycles far beyond what was once believed possible for Neolithic herders. Excavations led by Fred Vendorf and Romuald Schild in the 1970s uncovered these alignments, showing that certain stones marked the sunrise at the summer solstice, a calendar in rock that signalled the return of monsoon rains. To stand within that circle today is to feel time stretch in both directions, a silent geometry linking sky and earth, purpose and faith. Excavations revealed that the people of Nabta were not simple herders, but early astronomers and priests of the sky, marking celestial rhythms with sacred geometry. They built ceremonial mounds and underground chambers, sometimes aligned with the same stars they watched each season. The most striking feature, an alignment to Orion's belt, suggests that the night sky held both practical and spiritual meaning. These were people who measured life through constellations, reading the heavens not only for water and pasture, but perhaps for signs of creation itself. Some scholars see in their structures the first seeds of Egyptian cosmology, the idea that divine order was mirrored in the stars. Beneath the sand, archaeologists found mounds containing the remains of cattle, carefully arranged and buried as if prepared for eternity. These were not butchery sites, but deliberate interments, some containing complete skeletons, others fragments placed with ritual care. In one mound, a young cow was buried inside a stone-lined chamber, its bones resting beneath slabs carved to fit. This devotion to cattle predates the Egyptian bull cults by millennia, suggesting that Nabta's people revered the animal as a bridge between earth and sky, life and the beyond. In their faith, the herds that sustained them in life might have been guides through the cycles of death and renewal. Then the rains failed, the lake retreated, the sky that had once guided them offered no mercy as their world dried into silence. Around 4900 BCE, the African monsoon shifted south, leaving Nabta Playa to the advancing desert. The herders and astronomers who once gathered beneath the stars were forced to move, carrying fragments of their culture toward the Nile Valley. The dunes closed over their altars and stone circles, and the desert resumed its endless dominion. Nothing remained but a geometry of memory, lines and shadows that no longer had purpose but refused to disappear. Scholars trace echoes of Nabta's beliefs into the rise of ancient Egypt, the reverence for cattle, the alignment of temples, the worship of the sun itself. In the orientations of early shrines, in the celestial symbolism of the pyramid texts, there lingers the same fascination with cosmic order that once governed the lives of these desert astronomers. Some researchers suggest that the people of Nabta may have carried with them a philosophy of balance between heaven and earth that later became the foundation of Egyptian thought. Yet the evidence remains elusive, scattered across dunes and buried beneath layers of time. What remains are stones that speak through shadow, their purpose partly revealed yet forever incomplete, like fragments of a language too old to hear. The winds of the Sahara continue to shift around them, reshaping the dunes but never moving the circle itself. Each summer solstice, the sun still rises between the same ancient markers, casting the same long shadows across the basin. The desert, indifferent yet patient, preserves what it does not explain. Under the unchanging stars of the desert, the stones of Nabta Playa wait, guardians of a civilization that first gave them purpose. The megalith builders of Malta. Time itself seems to pause before the stones of Malta, built by the prehistoric temple-building communities of the megalithic period, which have outlasted empires, kings and memory. Perched atop limestone plateaus, the temples of Gantia, Hagar-Kim and Menajdra rise like monumental echoes from the Neolithic age, carved from coral limestone more than 5,500 years ago. Their sheer scale is astonishing. Some megaliths weigh tens of tons, standing in precise formation without mortar, aligned with celestial events that would have guided the lives of the people who shaped them. Modern observers cannot help but wonder how such societies, isolated on tiny Mediterranean islands, achieved this mastery of stone and space, leaving behind no written word, no lineage, only architecture. Early explorers stumbled upon walls carved from coral limestone, and the scale of the structures defied comprehension. 19th century villagers called the sites the work of giants, a name that seemed at once mythic and literal, given the enormity of some blocks. Archaeologists soon confirmed that these temples predate the Egyptian pyramids, yet their craters remain enigmatic. Excavations revealed not only the layout of the sanctuaries but also evidence of daily life. Stone altars, hearths, and fragments of pottery carefully arranged, suggesting rituals that required planning, labour and devotion. Every unearthed artefact hinted at a culture both sophisticated and intentionally hidden from history. Each megalith rises with precise curvature, forming sanctuaries whose alignments catch the sun on the longest day of the year. Doorways frame shafts of light that illuminate inner chambers exactly during solstices, revealing an intimate understanding of astronomical cycles. Spirals and carved symbols decorate the walls, often paired with depressions that might have held offerings. These structures were not merely shelters, they were instruments, calendars and sanctuaries, built to link the temporal and the divine. Scholars continue to puzzle over how Neolithic Maltese societies moved stones, weighing more than a dozen tons without the technology thought necessary for such feats. Inside these ancient halls, altars and figurines hint at ceremonies whose meaning has been lost to the centuries. Plaster statues of broad-hipped women, often referred to as goddesses, sit in niches, their forms emphasizing fertility and regeneration. Some chambers contain stone basins filled with traces of burned offerings, while others suggest communal gatherings where chants, music, or ritual dances may have taken place. The people of Malta left no script to explain these acts, but the scale and complexity of their constructions imply a spiritual system that governed both labour and belief, uniting a small island population around shared sacred practice. Then the island was abandoned. The people vanished without a record, leaving only stone to witness their devotion. Around 2500 BCE, for reasons still debated, these temple complexes fell silent. There are no signs of invasion or disease sufficient to explain the depopulation, and yet the island was left nearly empty, its monuments intact but no longer tended. Rising sea levels and ecological pressures may have contributed, isolating communities and making subsistence difficult. Whatever the cause, the disappearance is absolute. No direct descendants, no continuity of culture, no traceable lineage remains to connect later inhabitants with the builders of Malta's megaliths. No graves, no inscriptions, no successor culture marks their existence beyond the architecture itself. Unlike civilizations that leave written records or enduring cities, the Maltese megalith builders exist only through stone. Generations of scholars have attempted to decipher their origins, comparing construction techniques to those in Sicily or the Aegean, but no definitive link has been established. The temples themselves are both clue and enigma, massive archives of human ingenuity that cannot speak, preserved in silence against the erosive passage of time. Modern studies trace hints of maritime contact and shared architectural knowledge, yet the origins remain elusive. Some researchers suggest that the builders were part of a network of seafaring Neolithic peoples who communicated ideas and techniques across the Mediterranean. Obsidian, pottery styles, and architectural parallels hint at connections, but the precise roots, languages, and cultural exchanges are lost. What remains certain is that Malta's monuments belong to a civilization that achieved extraordinary skill, organization, and ritual focus before vanishing entirely. Even now, sunlight passes through ancient doorways and illuminates worn altars, as if the builder's intent persists beyond time. The islands are windswept, the limestone bleached by centuries of sun and salt, yet the temples stand resilient. Visitors who walk through their halls often report an almost conscious presence, as if the builder's devotion has imprinted itself on the stone. In this quiet endurance, the monuments continue to inspire awe, their meaning only partially revealed, their secrets preserved in plain sight yet inaccessible to human understanding. Though the civilization that built them has vanished, Malta's temples persist beneath centuries of wind and salt, their stones the only remaining voice. The disappearance of the Norte Chico. Long before the pyramids rose along the Nile, the Norte Chico civilization, as a society of builders and engineers, thrived in a world without writing, leaving massive plazas and mounds as its only testimony. In the arid river valleys of coastal Peru, they erected sunken circular plazas, stepped platforms, and monumental mounds that hinted a civilization of extraordinary organization. Yet these people vanished, leaving no written record, no fortifications, no successor culture to carry their knowledge forward. The enigma of their existence lingers as sharply as the contours of the plazas they left behind. When archaeologists first explored the Soup Valley in the late 20th century, they were astonished to uncover monumental constructions dating back more than 5,000 years. Sites such as Caral, Piramida de la Huanca, and Aspero reveal that Norte Chico was not only ancient but remarkably sophisticated, contemporaneous with early Egypt and Mesopotamia. The scale of construction, combined with precise planning of plazas and platforms, suggested a complex social organization capable of mobilizing labor and resources across vast distances, all while leaving barely a trace of domestic architecture or conventional settlements. Sunken circular plazas and pyramid-like platforms suggest a civilization that understood the mechanics of labor, organization, and communal space on a scale previously unimagined. The plazas, sometimes hundreds of meters across, required the coordinated movement of earth and stone, while the platforms rose deliberately in tiers, perhaps serving ceremonial or administrative purposes. Despite their size, these constructions were accomplished without metal tools or ceramics, relying instead on reed ropes, wooden implements, and human ingenuity. The precision and uniformity imply planning, hierarchy, and knowledge of geometry, yet the people who built them left no written explanation. Rivers and the nearby Pacific provided fish and irrigation opportunities, sustaining dense populations who built elaborate canals and water management systems. Agricultural terraces extended along the valley slopes, complementing the riverine resources, while trade networks may have linked communities along the coast and into the interior. Surprisingly, pottery was minimal, and there is no evidence of a writing system, yet society thrived for centuries. The economy was practical, tightly bound to the environment, and astonishingly resilient, a testament to human adaptation in an era often imagined as primitive. The immense public plazas hint at large gatherings, possibly for ceremony, ritual, or governance, yet the absence of writing leaves their social structure shrouded in mystery. Certain platforms may have hosted elite assemblies or served as oracles, while plazas likely accommodated communal activities or seasonal rituals. Archaeologists have found remnants of musical instruments, simple tools, and offerings, yet the interpretation of these remains is speculative. Every artifact amplifies the sense of sophistication, but the silence of the people themselves deepens the mystery. In the quiet corners of the plazas, archaeologists have uncovered delicate reed flutes and polished conch shells, suggesting that music accompanied the rituals and gatherings of Norte Chico. These instruments, often made from cane or marine shells, indicate that ceremonial life involved sound and rhythm, possibly guiding labour, ritual, or seasonal celebrations. The existence of such items demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of acoustics, as the plaza's circular design may have amplified music and chants across the space. Combined with evidence of communal feasts and offerings, the flutes and shells hint at a culture that integrated artistry, ritual, and social cohesion, a civilization whose sophistication extended beyond engineering into intangible aspects of daily and ceremonial life. Over centuries, the irrigation networks faltered, the population dispersed, and the monumental plazas were left to the desert. Their builders vanished without a trace. Environmental changes, including declining rainfall and soil depletion, may have stressed the delicate balance between river and agriculture. Internal social dynamics may have shifted, leaving communities unable to sustain the labour-intensive structures. Whatever combination of factors caused the abandonment, the outcome was total. The plazas were no longer maintained, platforms eroded, and the river continued to flow past sites emptied of human life. Despite decades of study, scholars debate whether environmental change, soil exhaustion, or internal social shifts caused the disappearance, with no definitive evidence to resolve the enigma. Radiocarbon dating confirms the chronology, while comparison with contemporary cultures underscores the anomaly. No known successor culture inherited the plazas or platforms, and little tangible continuity exists in the archaeological record. The mystery persists, challenging assumptions about how complex societies develop, flourish, and vanish without leaving direct cultural descendants. Today, the river flows past empty mounds, a silent witness to a civilization that mastered organization and engineering, only to leave behind questions that echo through time. The contours of the plazas and platforms remain visible from the air, revealing patterns of labor, social planning, and ingenuity that outlast the people who built them. Observers can trace the deliberate placement of stones and terraces, yet the human presence that created them has vanished completely, leaving only the landscape and the whispers of history. The sun rises over the abandoned plazas of Norte Chico, illuminating the ingenuity and mystery of a people whose mastery of rivers and earth has left only whispers in the sand. The Cucuteni-Trypillia mystery. Entire towns once rose across the plains of Eastern Europe, home to tens of thousands of the Cucuteni-Trypillia people, only to be deliberately burned and abandoned, leaving behind pottery, ashes, and questions that history cannot answer. These settlements, scattered across modern-day Romania, Moldova, and Ukraine, contained multi-house compounds, sunken plazas, and concentric layouts that rivaled contemporary Neolithic towns in complexity. Despite their size, sophistication, and population, the people vanished, leaving no written record and no immediate successors to inherit their knowledge. The enigma of how such a civilization could thrive and then disappear remains one of the most perplexing mysteries of prehistoric Europe, a society whose mastery of organization and artistry is still barely understood. Excavations revealed circular houses, sunken courtyards, and walls blackened by fire, suggesting both advanced planning and ritualized destruction. archaeologists uncovered charred timber beams, traces of hearths, and carefully arranged pottery shards, all pointing to deliberate burning rather than accidental fire. Radiocarbon dating confirms that many of these settlements were occupied between 4,800 and 3000 BCE, with some spanning centuries of continuous habitation. Sites such as Talyanki and Medanetska covered hundreds of hectares, indicating populations possibly exceeding 20,000 at a single location. The meticulous layouts and repeated patterns suggest a level of social organisation and labour coordination rarely seen in prehistoric Europe. Neighbourhoods formed concentric rings around communal plazas, with narrow lanes weaving between compounds, suggesting a level of coordination that is rare in most contemporary Neolithic societies. Houses were built from wattle and daub, often with timber frameworks and plastered interiors, and were clustered in ways that suggest neighbourhoods or extended family compounds. Some houses may have been multi-storey structures, connected by shared courtyards, reflecting both practical solutions for population density and a sophisticated understanding of space. The circular arrangement of buildings may have served symbolic purposes as well, echoing cosmological beliefs or reinforcing communal identity. Red, white, and black painted ceramics, along with clay figurines and abstract motifs, testify to a culture that expressed identity, belief, and possibly communication through art rather than writing. Spirals, concentric circles, and stylized depictions of humans and animals appear repeatedly on pots, bowls, and figurines, hinting at shared symbolic systems or spiritual practices. Some pottery was crafted from carefully selected clays, polished and fired with precision, demonstrating technical skill as well as artistic intention. Figurines may have represented fertility deities or social roles, while painted vessels could have marked ownership, ritual use, or communal events. Evidence of trade, such as obsidian and shells from distant regions, suggests cultural networks that extended far beyond individual settlements. In the quiet corners of the plazas, archaeologists have found traces of ceremonial deposits, small caches of figurines, tools, and pots placed intentionally, sometimes buried beneath floors or hearths. The systematic burning of settlements suggests practices that were intentional, whether to mark cycles, appease spiritual forces, or reorganize social order. The purpose remains elusive. Entire compounds were reduced to ashes at the same time, implying coordinated action rather than isolated events. This repeated pattern of destruction across dozens of settlements suggests a ritualized element to the abandonment, though its meaning has been lost to time. Scholars estimate that some settlements housed tens of thousands, implying collective labor, resource management, and complex social structures capable of sustaining large communities. These populations required careful coordination of agriculture, livestock, and food storage, as well as social systems capable of resolving disputes, directing construction, and managing ceremonial life. Communal gatherings, possibly in plazas or ceremonial areas, may have reinforced social cohesion or facilitated collective decisions. Yet despite the apparent sophistication, no evidence indicates a writing system or centralized authority. The Cucuteni-Trypillia people achieved urban organization through means that remain largely invisible to modern observers. Over the centuries, the plains grew quiet, settlements were left to the earth, and the people vanished, leaving no direct descendants or readable records. Environmental stress, including soil depletion, climate variability, and periodic flooding, may have strained the delicate balance between agriculture and settlement. Internal social upheaval, resource competition, or ritualized abandonment could have accelerated depopulation. Whatever combination of factors led to the disappearance, the outcome was the same. The plazas, houses, and streets were abandoned, leaving behind only ashes, pottery, and the lingering patterns of human life. Traces of Cucuteni-Trypillia motifs appear across Neolithic Europe, yet the civilization's sudden disappearance continues to challenge archaeologists, leaving only fragments and speculation. Connections to contemporary Balkan and Danubian cultures suggest trade, cultural exchange, and shared symbolism, but the scale, population, and abruptness of abandonment remain exceptional. Researchers continue to puzzle over how a civilization so populous, organized, and artistically sophisticated could vanish almost entirely, leaving behind only material echoes and the burned outlines of homes. The ashes of Cucuteni-Trypillia settlements still whisper across the plains, a civilization's ingenuity and mystery preserved only in the patterns of fire and clay. The dawn and fall of Sumer. The Sumerians, the earliest known urban civilization in southern Mesopotamia, left behind impressions pressed into clay thousands of years ago, the earliest messages from a vanished world. Cuneiform tablets, etched with painstaking precision by scribes, recorded transactions, laws and offerings to gods, offering glimpses of trade, governance and human ambition. Yet these fragile traces reveal only fragments of a society whose full complexity has been lost to time. Each tablet, no larger than a hand, carries the weight of entire cities and the lives of those who built them. Now buried beneath shifting sands, their voices silenced but not entirely erased. City walls rose above canals and winding streets, where labourers, merchants and priests moved along paths carefully designed to sustain the first true urban centres. Cities such as Uruk, Ur and Eridu became bustling hubs, their neighbourhoods arranged along straight streets or meandering lanes that followed the flow of rivers. Irrigation systems crisscrossed fields, directing water from the Tigris and Euphrates to sustain grain, barley and date palms. Markets thrived with pottery, textiles and imported goods, while labourers transported mud brick and timber to expand the growing urban sprawl. The scale and density of these cities were unmatched for their time, yet they depended on delicate balances between environment, agriculture and human labour. Ziggurats soared skyward, their stepped towers echoing both devotion and authority, visible from miles across the flat Mesopotamian plains. Each temple complex was a focal point for worship, administration and storage, while terraces above held shrines accessible only to priests and rulers. Constructed from mud brick reinforced with bitumen, these monumental structures were engineering marvels as well as spiritual symbols, designed to connect the earthly city with the heavens. The silhouette of a ziggurat dominated the skyline, proclaiming both power and piety and serving as a tangible reminder of the city's order and divine mandate. Kings and priest-kings wielded power through bureaucracies etched in clay, while labourers and artisans followed schedules dictated by necessity and ritual. Officials meticulously recorded labour contributions, taxation, legal decisions and temple offerings, establishing one of the earliest administrative systems in human history. Hierarchies were reinforced through monumental architecture, religious rites and the orchestration of daily life, from the timing of planting and harvest to the performance of sacred ceremonies. The social cohesion of these cities depended on both compliance and shared belief, a fragile balance maintained over centuries yet vulnerable to internal discord or environmental change. Mathematics, astronomy and literature flourished alongside commerce. Epic tales, star charts and numerical records reveal a civilization both practical and visionary. The Sumerians developed a base 60 mathematical system enabling precise calculations for trade, construction and the coordination of labour. Observations of celestial movements informed agricultural cycles and temple rituals, while scribes composed the earliest known stories, including the Epic of Gilgamesh, blending myth, morality and collective memory. These achievements display a society capable of both abstract thought and meticulous record-keeping, civilization that understood the power of knowledge in shaping human destiny. In the bustling streets and temple courtyards, the rhythms of Sumerian life were marked by drums, lyres, and the voices of traders calling their wares, a civilization alive with sound and movement. Markets thrived with textiles dyed from imported plants, pottery decorated with intricate motifs, and livestock exchanged for grain or tools. Young scribes learned cuneiform in schoolhouses attached to temples, copying texts and performing calculations, while craftsmen laboured in bronze, clay and wood to meet both practical and ceremonial needs. Religious festivals punctuated the calendar, bringing together city residents for processions, offerings, and ritual feasts. Even as the scribes recorded laws and transactions, the pulse of everyday life, the music, the commerce, the teaching of skills animated the streets, leaving traces that survive only in tablets, ruins, and the faint echoes of a vanished world. Rivers shifted, salt crept into fertile fields, and rival peoples pressed against city walls, testing the resilience of a civilization built on ingenuity. Environmental pressures, including over-irrigation, soil salinization, and periodic flooding strained urban populations. Intercity warfare and political fragmentation added further stress, challenging the stability of long-established bureaucracies. Despite sophisticated planning and monumental architecture, the cities were never immune to the slow erosion of resources, climate variability, and human ambition's inevitable friction. Despite monumental achievements, Sumerian cities fell silent, their kings and scribes gone, leaving ruins, cuneiform tablets, and legends whose full meaning may never be known. Some urban centres were absorbed by Akkadian, Babylonian, and later empires, while others simply crumbled, leaving behind only impressions of streets, canals, and public spaces. Mud brick walls eroded with time, and temple terraces collapsed, yet traces of ziggurats and city layouts continue to suggest the immense scale and sophistication of these vanished metropolises. Echoes of Sumerian thought resonate through subsequent civilizations, yet gaps remain, hinting at knowledge, artistry, and social innovation lost alongside city streets. Innovations in writing, law, mathematics, and astronomy persisted, shaping Babylonian and later empires, but much of Sumerian culture remains partially obscured. Scholars continue to piece together fragments of city plans, tablets, and artifacts, yet the intangible qualities of daily life, belief, and societal complexity remain elusive, a reminder of what humanity can build and still fail to preserve. Beneath the sands of southern Mesopotamia, the remnants of Sumer wait in silence, a civilization whose brilliance endures even as its voice has been lost to time. The hidden kingdom of Elam. Shadows of ancient citadels cling to the Zagros foothills, where kings once commanded armies and scribes recorded the deeds of a civilization now almost lost to time. Along rivers that nourished crops and linked distant cities, settlements rose with precision and order, hinting at political power, wealth, and a society whose full story survives only in fragments of stone and clay. This was the Elamite civilization, whose influence stretched across the ancient Near East, often intersecting with the more visible histories of Sumer, Akkad, and Babylon, yet whose memory is largely veiled by the passing centuries. Their cities were arranged with careful attention to hierarchy and accessibility, with citadels rising above lower residential quarters, yet no comprehensive map survives to reveal the full extent of their urban design. Temples and fortresses, clay tablets and inscriptions speak of a people who achieved both sophistication and mystery, their legacy obscured by the sands and mountains they once commanded. Nestled between the rugged Zagros highlands and the fertile lowland plains, Elam's cities occupied strategic locations that encouraged agriculture, trade, and defense. Rivers carved through the land, creating lifelines for crops, herds, and the transport of goods and ideas. Irrigation channels and terraces carved into the foothills hint at agricultural knowledge that sustained dense populations, revealing a society capable of manipulating the landscape in ways that later civilizations would only partially replicate. Citadels crowned hills and rose beside riverbanks, their architecture blending practicality with a symbolic assertion of power. Roads of beaten earth and waterways connected settlements, and though few of these paths remain, evidence of trade, pottery, lapis lazuli, copper, and imported metals reveals a kingdom attuned to the currents of exchange that shaped the region. From fortified palaces and administrative centres, kings wielded authority that extended over armies, cities, and distant outposts. Their inscriptions and stele record victories, decrees, and alliances, demonstrating a sophisticated governance system that relied on both coercion and diplomacy. Some inscriptions reference rulers whose names are partially legible, their victories over neighbouring city-states noted in cryptic symbols that still puzzle modern scholars. Elamite rulers navigated shifting political landscapes, sometimes clashing with Mesopotamian empires, at other times forming alliances to protect their borders or expand influence. Military campaigns left scars on the land, while tribute and negotiated settlements strengthened the kingdom's presence across the lowlands and highlands. Art and culture flourished alongside political organisation. Cylinder seals, intricately carved stone sculptures, and clay tablets offer glimpses into daily life, ritual practice, and social hierarchy. Proto-Elamite script, though not fully deciphered, hints at accounting systems, lineage, and religious observances, revealing a people attentive to record-keeping and symbolic communication. Many seals depict figures entwined with mythical beasts or abstract symbols, suggesting rituals or stories whose meanings remain hidden beneath layers of time. Monuments, altars, and carved reliefs demonstrate a careful balance between functional architecture and ceremonial grandeur, suggesting a civilization deeply invested in preserving its memory through tangible forms. Trade and diplomacy are intertwined with the kingdom's military might. Elamite merchants and soldiers traversed deserts, rivers, and mountain passes, bringing goods and cultural influence to distant lands. Elamite merchants carried copper from the mountains, lapis lazuli from distant mines, and textiles dyed with rare pigments, moving across deserts and rivers to reach markets in Sumer and beyond. Pottery, copper, and textiles moved alongside ideas, religious concepts, and technological knowledge. When armies marched, they did so not only in conquest but as emissaries of culture, leaving impressions of Elamite authority on the cities they encountered. The kingdom's reach, though often overshadowed by its neighbours, was undeniable in the echoes it left in Mesopotamian records and archaeological evidence. Religion permeated both urban and rural spaces. Temples atop hills and within city walls hosted offerings, feasts, and ceremonies, and burials reveal complex funerary practices that intertwined reverence for ancestors with the veneration of deities. Some burial sites reveal elaborate tombs with offerings placed as if for a ruler's journey to an afterlife, their full purpose and symbolism now lost to time. Many aspects of Elamite cosmology remain enigmatic, preserved only in fragments. Inscriptions, symbols, and the occasional monumental statue hint at beliefs that shaped daily life and the political sphere alike. Scholars continue to debate the meanings of these rituals, which blend practicality with symbolism, hinting at a worldview both sophisticated and elusive. Experiencing repeated cycles of rise and fall, Elam endured the passage of centuries. At times, the kingdom expanded, subduing neighbours and asserting dominance over contested lands. At others, it was absorbed or weakened by external forces. Shifts in river courses, incursions from foreign armies, and internal disputes may have gradually fractured the kingdom, leaving monuments and inscriptions scattered and incomplete. Eventually, the kingdom's political structures diminished, and much of its memory faded into the margins of recorded history. What survives is fragmentary: palaces, citadels, inscriptions, and pottery. But even these shards testify to a civilization of remarkable resilience and achievement, whose full story remains tantalizingly out of reach. Fragments of tablets, carved stones, and monumental architecture endure, speaking across millennia of a people who shaped empires, crafted intricate works of art, and governed with precision, yet whose history remains partially hidden. Archaeologists piece together the lives of kings, priests, and commoners, reconstructing networks of power and belief from remnants of a civilization whose voice has largely been silenced. Each excavation uncovers fragments that hint at a vibrant civilization, yet for every artifact unearthed, countless others remain buried, leaving Elam's full story tantalizingly incomplete. Across the Zagros foothills, the hidden kingdom of Elam endures in silence, its secrets preserved only in shadow and memory. The enigma of the Indus Valley civilization. In the labyrinthine streets of a city that once hummed with life, bricks of uniform size and canals aligned with mathematical precision still puzzle those who walk among their remnants. Mud brick homes rise in geometric patterns, wells and drains intersect with uncanny regularity, and the silent echoes of human activity linger in the shadows of collapsed walls. This was the Indus Valley civilization, known to history primarily through the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro, Harappa, and dozens of other settlements spread across the fertile plains of modern Pakistan and northwest India. Its inhabitants built with a level of urban sophistication unmatched in their time, yet they left behind no decipherable writing, no royal tombs, no monuments to their kings, only the carefully measured streets, baths, and granaries that hinted a society of extraordinary planning and order. Entire neighbourhoods reveal evidence of meticulous planning, where streets intersect at right angles, and wells, granaries, and public baths suggest a society attuned to hygiene and utility. Cities were organised into residential blocks separated by broad avenues, with drainage systems that carried waste away from homes, and streets with a precision that modern engineers admire. Brick sizes were standardised, implying a form of regulation or oversight that reached across entire cities. Such careful construction, maintained over centuries, indicates a civilization capable of both communal organisation and administrative foresight. Yet the principles guiding these urban designs remain lost. Seals etched with tiny symbols hint at language, trade and governance, yet the script remains undeciphered, leaving every word suspended in silence. Thousands of these seals, often depicting animals, mythical creatures or abstract symbols, suggest the existence of a complex communication system and perhaps legal or commercial functions. Scholars have debated the meaning for decades, unable to uncover the phonetic or linguistic patterns that would reveal the society's inner workings. The absence of a Rosetta Stone for this civilization leaves the Indus script as a lingering riddle, a silent testament to intellect whose voice has been swallowed by time. Beads, pottery, and meticulously measured weights travelled hundreds of miles, evidence of trade networks that spanned rivers, deserts, and coasts with remarkable efficiency. Copper from the mountains, semi-precious stones, and shells from the Arabian Sea reached cities far from their source, pointing to a system of commerce that connected distant settlements and facilitated cultural exchange. Craft specialization flourished, with workshops producing standardized goods that suggest both economic organization and aesthetic sensibility. Even without written records, the material culture of the Indus people conveys a society deeply integrated and interconnected, sophisticated in both production and distribution. Homes of baked brick sheltering multi-generational families, courtyards for communal life, and meticulously organized streets speak of a society that balanced privacy, utility, and social cohesion. Archaeological evidence hints at nuanced social roles, with artisans, traders, and administrators living side by side, each contributing to the rhythm of daily life. Public spaces such as granaries and ceremonial baths imply shared resources and civic concern. Life in these cities was structured and ordered, yet intimate and human, leaving traces that inspire both admiration and questions about the social mechanisms that governed their flourishing. Terracotta figurines, carefully placed in shrines or buried beneath floors, suggest a spiritual life intertwined with daily routines, their exact meaning lost to time. Some figurines appear to depict deities or ritual participants, while others may have served protective or symbolic functions within households. Small altars and the occasional temple-like structure indicate a system of belief. But without written explanations, interpretation relies on conjecture and analogy. Even in the absence of clarity, these artifacts convey a civilization attuned to both the material and the spiritual dimensions of existence. Flooded plains, shifting river channels, and the slow abandonment of cities hint at environmental or societal pressures that erase this civilization without a trace of violent conquest. Evidence suggests that rivers, once stable and predictable, changed course, undermining agriculture and forcing populations to relocate. Climate fluctuations and soil salinization may have compounded the challenges, yet no invaders or cataclysmic war accounts for the disappearance. The Indus Valley civilization seemingly faded into quiet absence, leaving cities intact but emptied, streets maintained yet untravelled, a vanishing that continues to confound historians and archaeologists. Though rivers have carried away mud bricks and centuries have dulled human memory, the precision of their cities, the undeciphered script, and the artifacts left behind continue to intrigue and confound modern scholars. Excavations yield glimpses of public baths, granaries, and streets that demonstrate extraordinary civic awareness, yet the people themselves remain unknowable. Every discovery answers one question while raising 10 more, reinforcing the paradox of a civilization simultaneously advanced and mysterious. The ghostly cities of the Indus endure across the plains, their streets silent yet meticulously ordered, guarding secrets that may never be uncovered. The Nabada civilization of Syria. Etched with symbols long unreadable, fragments of clay tablets emerge from the sands of northern Syria, their markings hinting at a civilization that once flourished along the Orontes and Euphrates rivers. These small, fragile remnants are among the few tangible traces of the Nabada people, whose cities and settlements extended across plains and river valleys now parched or cultivated. From the scattered ruins, archaeologists have pieced together glimpses of a society that balanced agriculture, urbanism, and ritual, yet whose story disappears into silence centuries before written chronicles recorded the rise and fall of its neighbours. The Nabada left behind walls, streets and objects that speak to ingenuity, precision and cultural sophistication, yet their language, political systems and reasons for vanishing remain largely unknowable. Stone foundations and remnants of massive walls suggest that Nabada settlements were carefully organised, with citadels rising above clusters of dwellings, commanding both space and security. Fortifications indicate not only defensive concerns, but also centralised planning, with narrow streets, public squares, and communal spaces suggesting a society conscious of both hierarchy and cooperation. Archaeological excavations reveal the deliberate positioning of granaries, workshops, and shrines, showing that daily life was carefully interwoven with civic and spiritual obligations. The scale and complexity of these settlements imply that Nabada was more than a loose collection of villages. It was an urban civilization capable of coordinating labour, resources and planning over generations. Channels cut into the soil and terraces along riverbanks indicate sophisticated irrigation, feeding populations that may have numbered in the tens of thousands. The rivers provided water for crops such as barley, wheat and legumes, and evidence suggests that the Nabada engineered reservoirs and canals to regulate seasonal flooding. These innovations allowed agriculture to flourish in an environment that could be unpredictable and harsh, demonstrating an intimate understanding of the land and its cycles. Herding also played a role, with sheep, goats and cattle contributing to both diet and ritual, integrating livestock into the very structure of Nabada society. Pottery painted with geometric motifs, bronze tools and beads carved from semi-precious stones testify to skilled artisans whose techniques were refined yet remain partially enigmatic. The pottery demonstrates not only practical function but aesthetic sensibility, with patterns repeated across sites suggesting cultural norms or symbolic meaning. Metalwork, often in the form of tools, weapons or ornaments, indicates knowledge of smelting and casting processes that required both technical skill and resource procurement. Small personal items, including combs, pins and decorative objects, point to a society attentive to daily life, social identity and craftsmanship. Objects crafted from Anatolian obsidian, Mesopotamian lapis, and coastal shells reveal a network of exchange stretching across deserts and rivers, linking Nabada to distant lands. Trade brought goods, ideas, and perhaps religious or cultural concepts that influenced urban and domestic life. Archaeological evidence suggests that trade was coordinated, using standard measures, weights, and routes, connecting Nabada communities to Mesopotamia, Anatolia, and the Mediterranean coast. These connections imply not only economic acumen but diplomatic awareness, a civilization capable of negotiating its place in a broader regional network without leaving behind written treaties. Evidence of early metallurgy and tool-making workshops hints at a technological sophistication that allowed Nabada inhabitants to manipulate bronze, copper, and stone with skill that rivaled contemporaneous civilizations. Archaeologists have uncovered remnants of furnaces, slag, and specialized tools that suggest systematic metal production, likely used for both daily implements and ceremonial objects. These workshops appear integrated into residential areas, implying that innovation was not isolated but embedded within the fabric of society. The refinement of metal alloys, combined with precision crafting, points to knowledge transmitted across generations, yet there is no written record explaining methods or organization. Such evidence illustrates a civilization that married technical expertise with social cohesion, yet whose mastery vanished along with its people, leaving only artifacts that silently testify to their ingenuity. Burial mounds, accompanied by offerings of food, ceramics, and small figurines, hint at ritual practices and beliefs whose purposes are only partially understood. Tombs suggest reverence for the dead, perhaps including notions of an afterlife or ancestral worship, while domestic shrines indicate daily religious observances integrated into household routines. Figurines, often stylized or abstract, may have represented deities, ancestors, or protective spirits, though their exact significance is unknown. The placement of ritual items within homes or public spaces demonstrates a society that embedded spiritual life into both civic and domestic structures. Arid winds, shifting rivers, and evidence of abandoned settlements suggest that environmental stress, combined with political fragmentation, may have led to the sudden dispersal of Nabada communities. Sites show partial destruction, layers of sand and gradual abandonment rather than violent conquest, indicating that climate change or resource depletion may have forced inhabitants to relocate. Over time, population centres diminished, trade networks fragmented, and cultural continuity waned, leaving ruins that silently attest to the rise and fall of a once flourishing civilization. Eroded by time and bearing obscured inscriptions, the surviving artifacts, city layouts, and ceremonial structures continue to fascinate, offering only partial glimpses of a society that vanished from history. Scholars reconstruct daily life, trade, and ritual through careful excavation, yet each discovery raises new questions about governance, social hierarchy, and the forces behind the civilization's decline. Even in its absence, Nabada exerts a persistent pull on imagination, a society both real and elusive, its full story suspended between evidence and speculation. The echoes of Nabada linger in silent ruins, their stories suspended between sand and memory, awaiting a revelation that may never come. The Minoans of Crete. Dancers move through the corridors of a palace, their painted frescoes capturing gestures that had echoed through generations on the island of Crete, home to the Minoan civilization. The walls of Knossos, Phaistos, and Malea still whisper the rhythm of drums, the sway of ritual, and the hum of a society whose influence stretched across the Aegean. Frescoes depict the dynamic lives of women, men, and animals, revealing a culture both vibrant and enigmatic. Though the Minoans left no surviving texts explaining their governance, religion, or daily customs in a comprehensive form, their cities, art, and artifacts offer tantalizing glimpses of a civilization that thrived for centuries before fading into mystery. Labyrinthine corridors, grand staircases, and storage rooms lined with pithoi suggest that Minoan palaces were centers of administration, commerce, and ritual all at once. These palaces, often multi-storied, were built with precise engineering and sophisticated drainage systems, reflecting an advanced understanding of architecture and urban planning. Central courtyards may have hosted religious ceremonies, public gatherings, or trade exchanges, integrating social, spiritual, and economic life. The layout of these structures implies a culture with both centralized authority and an appreciation for spatial symbolism, where function and artistry were inseparable. Brightly coloured frescoes depict bulls, dolphins, and ritual dances, hinting at spiritual practices and societal values that modern observers can only partially decode. Stylized motifs appear repeatedly across sites, suggesting a shared cultural vocabulary and possibly a codified system of symbolic communication. Scenes of bull leaping, sacred animals, and floral patterns reveal a fascination with nature, strength, and movement, while domestic motifs imply attention to everyday life. Each stroke of pigment offers insight into a civilization that celebrated both aesthetic mastery and the mystery of existence. Amphorae from the Cyclades, Egypt, and the Levant indicate that the Minoans were skilled navigators, their ships carrying not only goods but ideas across the seas. Olive oil, wine, pottery, and crafted items circulated widely, creating a network of exchange that enriched Cretan cities and reinforced their influence. Evidence of imported materials demonstrates strategic trade relationships and an understanding of distant markets, while port installations reveal planning and logistical expertise. Maritime culture was central not just to the economy but to identity, weaving the island's communities into a broader Mediterranean tapestry. Appearing in clay seals, storage ledgers, and standardized weights, evidence of administrative ingenuity reveals a civilization that organized complex economic and bureaucratic systems long before written records could fully capture them. These small but precise artifacts indicate that Minoan authorities monitored the flow of goods, recorded transactions, and perhaps coordinated production across multiple palace centers. Seals suggest that ownership and control were carefully maintained, while standardized weights imply an early understanding of measurement, trade regulation, and consistency in commerce. Even without deciphered texts, this system hints at social hierarchies, governance, and inter-palace communication that kept the island's economy thriving. The sophistication of these tools contrasts with the sudden disappearance of the society, leaving only subtle traces of organization amid abandoned palaces and empty harbors. Caves carved into mountain slopes and sacred peak sanctuaries suggest that Minoan spirituality intertwined the natural world with civic authority, blending reverence with performance. Shrines, altars, and figurines indicate ritual practices that likely involved seasonal celebrations, fertility rites, and veneration of animals, particularly bulls and snakes. The prominence of natural features within religious observance implies a belief system that saw the divine in landscape, fauna, and celestial cycles. Ritual objects found within palaces suggest that worship was not confined to secluded spaces, but integrated with governance and public life. Bronze tools, intricately designed pottery, and ornamental jewellery reveal a culture with an advanced understanding of materials, technique, and aesthetic sensibility. Workshops within urban centres demonstrate specialisation, while the range of artefacts suggests that Minoans achieved both functional and decorative mastery. The creation of fine blades, containers, and adornments required knowledge of metal alloys, clay firing, and carving, showing technical innovations embedded in everyday and ceremonial contexts. These objects survive as traces of ingenuity, hinting at a society whose full knowledge vanished alongside its people. Ash and rubble hint at sudden calamities, while later layers suggest rebuilding attempts. Yet the Minoan palaces were ultimately abandoned, their inhabitants dispersed into history. The eruption of Thera may have caused widespread disruption, but earthquakes, fires, and political instability likely compounded the effects, undermining social cohesion. Once thriving urban centres became silent, corridors empty, and trade networks fractured. Scholars debate whether natural disaster alone precipitated the collapse or if internal conflict played a role, leaving the civilization's final chapters shrouded in ambiguity. Remaining undeciphered and with many customs lost to time, the language of Linear A and the Minoans' culture continue to inspire wonder through their artistry, engineering, and maritime prowess. Archaeologists reconstruct palace layouts, fresco techniques, and craft production, yet each discovery raises further questions about social hierarchy, religious meaning, and daily life. The civilization's influence echoes in later Greek mythology, architectural motifs, and ritual symbolism, suggesting that while the Minoans disappeared from view, their ideas flowed onward, preserved in fragments of memory and material culture. Lingering on Crete, the echoes of bull-leaping painted walls and silent corridors recall a civilization alive in fragments, yet gone from the footsteps of history. The rise and fall of the Mycenaeans. Centuries before the marble columns of classical Greece would rise in sunlit perfection, a network of fortified citadels ruled the southern mainland, their walls thick with stone and their halls echoing with the clamour of warriors and artisans. This was the realm of the Mycenaeans, a civilization whose very name would become entwined with legend, yet whose fate would dissolve into silence almost as swiftly as it had flourished. Archaeological remains speak of a society both sophisticated and warlike, a people who inscribed their language in the undeciphered Linear B tablets, amassed treasures of gold in underground Tholos tombs, and built their cities atop hills that overlook the valleys like sentinels of power. The heart of Mycenaean power lay in monumental citadels such as Mycenae, Tiryns, and Pylos, the walls composed of massive cyclopean stones, whose construction alone defied simple explanation. Within these fortresses, palace complexes housed scribes, warriors, and priests, all operating in a hierarchy that fused administration with ritual. Excavations of the so-called Treasury of Atreus reveal intricately corbelled chambers, their vaulted ceilings both architectural marvel and silent witness to funerary rites that once honoured kings and queens. Grave goods recovered from shaft tombs in Mycenae suggest an extraordinary wealth, with gold masks, weapons, and jewellery indicating a society capable of extensive trade and artistic sophistication, yet always prepared for conflict. Evidence of Mycenaean seafaring stretches beyond the mainland, hinting at a culture that moved goods, ideas, and influence across the Aegean. Artifacts found on Crete and Cyprus, and even along the Levantine coast suggest a network of trade that carried tin and copper for bronze, pottery styles, and luxury items. Yet, these same connections may have drawn the attention of rivals, fostering a world of fragile alliances and inevitable confrontations. The Linear B tablets, though primarily administrative in nature, hint at the demands of sustaining armies and fleets, recording allocations of grain, oil, and weaponry that speak to the constant preparation for both defence and conquest. Mycenaean society, though organised, was not immune to the turbulence of its age. Around 1200 BCE, the palaces fell into ruin, walls cracked, and buildings burned, leaving behind only the bones of those who had once ruled or served within their halls. Scholars have debated whether internal strife, foreign invasions, climate shifts, or systemic economic collapse led to this sudden decline. Some suggest that migrating peoples or marauding raiders contributed to the destruction, while others point to evidence of seismic activity that may have weakened the foundations of these citadels. Whatever the causes, the end came abruptly enough to scatter a civilization's people into obscurity and scatter their records across the ruins. The Mycenaeans' legacy is enigmatic, preserved partially in legend and partially in the remnants of their material culture. Homeric epics composed centuries later echo with the memory of mighty kings and city-states locked in a war of epic proportions, though they offer little in the way of concrete chronology. Archaeologists uncover fragments of frescoes in palace complexes, vivid with depictions of ceremonial hunts, chariots in motion, and processions that suggest a society intensely conscious of status, pageantry, and power. Each painted wall and carved relief speaks to lives lived in splendor and fear, yet the stories remain incomplete, leaving modern observers to piece together meaning from silence and stone. Some mysteries endure even in death. Burial practices varied widely, from the famous shaft graves in Mycenae to more modest interments across the Peloponnesus, implying social stratification and regional differences in ritual. Gold funeral masks, most famously the so-called Mask of Agamemnon, hint at reverence for leaders and perhaps the belief in an afterlife, yet the origins and precise use of these objects remain unresolved. These treasures, discovered intact only millennia later, suggest a people both rich in artistry and meticulous in their commemoration of the dead, yet incapable of securing their own survival against the sweeping changes that engulfed the late Bronze Age. Even as their citadels fell silent, traces of Mycenaean influence lingered in the centuries that followed. Pottery styles, weapon forms, and settlement patterns influenced subsequent Greek societies, creating a subtle cultural continuity that belied the abrupt disappearance of political power. Yet the scale of their loss remains haunting. Once thriving palaces were abandoned to decay, tombs became repositories of silence, and the Linear B script, once a tool of administration, disappeared until rediscovered in modern excavations. What remains is a landscape marked by the sudden absence of its architects, a memory of civilization that once radiated energy and order but vanished into obscurity. The story of the Mycenaeans is both familiar and incomprehensible, a civilization known through fragments yet shadowed by uncertainty. Every wall, every grave, and every shard of pottery is a testament to lives that were vivid, organized, and impermanent. Even now, as researchers continue to study their ruins, the Mycenaeans maintain a spectral presence, their rise celebrated and their fall whispered through corridors of stone. And in the quiet of the Peloponnesian hills, the ruins still hold secrets that have never been spoken aloud. The Empire of the Hittites. In the highlands of central Anatolia, a civilization once rivaled the greatest powers of its time, yet for centuries its story lay hidden beneath layers of dust and stone. The Hittites, whose name would vanish from records for centuries, established a kingdom that stretched across rugged plateaus and fertile river valleys, commanding armies and trade routes alike. Their cities, crowned with fortified walls and monumental gates, housed kings whose authority radiated through both law and ritual. Even as Egypt chronicled victories and treaties, the Hittites moved in shadows, their empire an enigma later reconstructed from clay tablets and inscriptions long forgotten. Roaming the Anatolian plateau long before the Hittite kings carved their authority into the walls of Hattusa, scattered tribes forged identities that would eventually coalesce into an empire. Archaeological evidence points to early settlements dating back to the 2nd millennium BCE, communities that gradually adopted advanced metallurgy, built defensive citadels, and established alliances to strengthen their foothold. By the 17th century BCE, a recognizable Hittite state had emerged, with Hattusa as its political and ceremonial center, perched on steep hills and guarded by massive stone walls, adorned with lions and inscriptions, proclaiming the power of kings yet to be fully known. Within the gates of Hattusa, scribes meticulously recorded laws, treaties, and edicts that governed a complex and sometimes volatile society. Cuneiform tablets preserved the administrative details of the palace, from grain allocations to labor assignments, revealing a bureaucracy capable of managing vast territories. Royal decrees detailed religious ceremonies, military campaigns, and diplomatic relations, illustrating the Hittites' awareness of both internal cohesion and external threats. The legal codes covering marriage, property, and crime suggest a society deeply invested in order and conscious of the ever-present danger that could unravel their structure. Chariots thundered across plains and mountains, carrying Hittite warriors into campaigns that would bring them face to face with the pharaohs of Egypt. Their armies were among the most formidable of the late Bronze Age, combining infantry, archers, and charioteers in tactics that allowed them to seize territory and defend against rival powers. The Battle of Kadesh, fought against Ramses II, exemplifies both the Hittites' military skill and their capacity for diplomacy, concluding not with decisive conquest but with a treaty that stands as one of the earliest surviving examples of international negotiation. Even in confrontation, the Hittites understood power beyond brute force. Religious ceremonies and monumental art filled the palaces, while cuneiform tablets preserved the words of kings and priests alike. Temples and shrines honoured storm gods and goddesses, blending Anatolian beliefs with influences from Mesopotamia and Syria. Frescoes depicting lions, bulls, and ritual scenes adorned palace walls, capturing a culture that celebrated both might and ceremony. Tablets reveal omens, prophecies, and correspondence with neighbouring states, illustrating a civilization that interpreted the world through both human and divine lenses, leaving traces that endure in fragments of clay. Trade winds carried the Hittites' influence far beyond their borders, as metals, textiles, and ideas flowed through an intricate web of connections. Copper and tin for bronze travelled along mountain passes, while luxury items moved between Anatolia, the Levant, and Mesopotamia. These exchanges fostered prosperity and cultural interaction, allowing the Hittites to project influence through commerce as well as conquest. Their reach was subtle and pervasive, leaving artifacts and stylistic imprints in regions where no Hittite city ever stood, a quiet testament to a power that extended through negotiation as much as war. Yet even mighty empires are vulnerable to forces both human and natural, and cracks began to appear in the foundations of Hittite power. Internal struggles, succession disputes, and regional rebellions weakened cohesion, while environmental pressures, including drought, may have strained resources and disrupted trade. By the late 13th century BCE, Tartessos and other cities show evidence of destruction and abandonment, leaving behind charred walls and scattered artifacts. The empire's disappearance was gradual, a slow fading of authority that left only traces for later generations to uncover. Then, almost without warning, the empire that had once dominated the Near East vanished from the record, leaving only fragments to hint at its existence. For centuries, the Hittites were forgotten by historians, mentioned only sporadically in Egyptian texts as distant foes or allies. Their language fell silent, their cities were buried, and the knowledge of their accomplishments lingered only in rumour. It was not until the 19th century that explorers and philologists uncovered Hattusa and began to decipher the cuneiform tablets, restoring the Hittites to human history. Uncovering cities swallowed by time, deciphering cuneiform texts, archaeologists began to reconstruct a narrative that had been all but erased centuries later. Excavations revealed palaces, fortifications, and temples, each offering glimpses of daily life, ritual, and statecraft. Yet for every tablet translated, for every wall unearthed, new questions arose. The full extent of the Hittites' influence, the nature of their disappearance, and the subtleties of their alliances remained partly obscured, as if the empire's architects intended some secrets to linger beyond reach. Despite these revelations, shadows remain, and questions linger over the true extent of the Hittites' reach, their culture, and the causes of their disappearance. The empire that once rivaled Egypt, shaped Anatolia, and commanded respect from distant powers now survives as a puzzle composed of stone, clay, and silence, leaving modern observers to wander the ruins of memory and imagination. The stones of Hattusa still guard secrets that may never be fully understood. The collapse of the Mitanni Kingdom. In the fertile river valleys of northern Mesopotamia, a kingdom once flourished between giants, yet almost nothing survives to tell its full story. The Mitanni, whose influence stretched across the lands of modern Syria and Iraq, occupied a space both strategic and precarious, caught between the rising powers of the Hittites to the north and the Egyptians to the south. Archaeological remains are scarce, yet fragments of tablets, treatises and palaces hint at a civilization that was both sophisticated and elusive. Its cities once bustled with trade, chariots and courtly rituals, but the kingdom's voice was silenced so completely that, for centuries, its existence was remembered only in the archives of neighbouring empires. The rulers of Mitanni spoke a tongue far removed from their Hurrian subjects, their names and titles echoing distant Indo-Aryan roots. Scholars have identified traces of this linguistic heritage in royal names and in prayers to gods such as Indra, Varuna, and Mitra, suggesting an elite culture imported from far beyond the mountains. These rulers blended foreign traditions with local customs, creating a hybrid society that wielded power through both martial strength and cultural prestige. The fusion of peoples and practices left few direct inscriptions, making the task of reconstructing their story a puzzle of indirect evidence. Within the palace walls, kings and courtiers navigated a delicate balance of ritual, politics, and the constant awareness of looming neighbours. Mitanni kings governed through a network of vassals, marriage alliances, and religious authority, carefully maintaining their position between the ambitious powers surrounding them. Administrative tablets reveal inventories of grain, livestock, and horses, suggesting meticulous oversight of resources vital for both war and diplomacy. Yet for all their control, the records are fragmentary, leaving gaps that amplify the kingdom's mysterious aura. War chariots swept across plains, guarding the kingdom's borders while projecting strength that few dared to challenge. Mitanni armies were renowned for their cavalry, especially horse archers who could strike with speed and precision. Fortified cities dotted the landscape, defending fertile lands while enabling the projection of military power. Evidence suggests campaigns against rival kingdoms and occasional raids into Hittite and Assyrian territories, yet these efforts were ultimately insufficient to preserve the kingdom against mounting pressures from stronger neighbours. Temples and altars bore witness to a pantheon that intertwined local traditions with imported deities, their rites leaving only whispers of devotion. Elite rituals invoked Indo-Aryan gods alongside Hurrian deities, blending belief and authority in a manner that legitimized the king's rule. Archaeological fragments hint at ceremonial architecture and altars, though the specifics of Mitanni worship remain elusive. Even the smallest traces, clay figurines, fragments of inscriptions, suggest a civilization that invested heavily in ritual as both spiritual practice and political instrument. Letters carved in cuneiform reveal a state entangled in alliances, negotiating marriages and treaties with powers both near and far. The Mitanni engaged diplomatically with Egypt, exchanging princesses and sealing agreements that ensured temporary peace. Correspondence preserved in the Amarna archives records their strategic awareness, revealing a kingdom acutely conscious of its place between empires. Yet these letters also emphasize vulnerability, hinting at pressures that were always pressing against their borders and their authority. Fields, horses and rivers sustained a fragile economy, linking Mitanni to distant lands through this trade of both wealth and expertise. Fertile plains produced grain that fed armies and populations, while horses bred for chariots were highly prized across the Near East. Artifacts such as ceramics and metalwork suggest trade with Anatolia, Mesopotamia, and Syria. The kingdom's prosperity relied on these interconnected networks, yet the very dependencies that enabled wealth may have exposed it to the disruptions that accompanied regional conflict and climate instability. Gathering at the edges of the kingdom, shadows marked the slow erosion of its authority as encroaching armies and internal unrest advanced. The Hittites pushed from the north, Assyrian forces pressed from the east, and local rebellions destabilized cities. Archaeological layers reveal burned settlements and sudden abandonment in key sites, suggesting that Mitanni's decline was neither gradual nor peaceful. Whatever combination of war, diplomacy, and environmental pressure occurred, it dismantled a kingdom that had once commanded respect and influence. Suddenly the kingdom vanished from history, leaving only fragments in the archives of those who once recorded its deeds. No palace stood intact, no continuous narrative survived, and the Mitanni's language disappeared from the official record. The story of their rise, governance, and culture survives only in traces left in foreign texts, scattered ruins, and enigmatic inscriptions, leaving modern scholars to piece together a civilization glimpsed through the eyes of others. Piecing together a culture that flickered briefly before fading completely, archaeologists and historians can only reconstruct glimpses of Mitanni life. The kingdom's brief but brilliant presence shaped the political and cultural contours of the Near East, yet its disappearance is as complete as it is mysterious. Every recovered tablet, fragment, and ruin serves as both revelation and reminder of what cannot be known, keeping the Mitanni suspended between history and shadow. The silent ruins of Mitanni continue to guard their secrets, whispering across centuries to those who dare to listen. The shrouded Empire of Tartessos. Legend spoke of a kingdom whose treasures were coveted across the Mediterranean, known to outsiders only through whispers and merchants' tales. Greek and Phoenician travellers described Tartessos as a realm of extraordinary wealth, abundant in silver, gold, and exotic goods. Its fame stretched far beyond the Iberian coast, yet the civilization itself left behind almost no written record, its cities now buried beneath layers of sediment or reclaimed by rivers long shifted from their ancient courses. For centuries, Tartessos existed primarily in rumour, a shimmering enigma glimpsed through the eyes of others. Rivers and estuaries carried vessels laden with silver and tin, the lifeblood of a society that commanded respect without ever fully revealing its inner workings. Archaeologists suggest that Tartessos thrived along the Guadalquivir and other navigable waterways, where trade with Phoenicians and Greeks flourished. These rivers linked inland mines with coastal ports, allowing the kingdom to control a network of commerce that reached across the western Mediterranean. The flow of wealth and resources gave Tartessos both influence and obscurity, as its power was measured more in coins and metals than in monuments. Gold flowed from hills and streams into the hands of Tartessian elites, exchanged for exotic items that spread across distant lands. Artifacts recovered from sites believed to be connected to the civilization reveal intricate jewellery, decorated vessels, and metalwork of exceptional skill. These treasures suggest a society of artisans and patrons whose wealth was both practical and symbolic, signalling power to those who arrived by sea to trade. The abundance of metals may also have fueled the legends that surrounded the kingdom, inspiring awe and speculation among foreign merchants and travellers. Crafted with intricate skill, ornaments and pottery hint at a hierarchy of power and wealth that shaped coastal society, even though no grand palaces survive. The urban centres likely included administrative hubs, workshops and markets where merchants and elites intersected. While details remain scarce, the surviving artefacts imply social stratification and specialised craftsmanship, suggesting a civilization that combined both commerce and ceremonial life. Even in their absence, these objects evoke a people who sought to display their prestige through artistry and controlled resources. Boats and ships moved silently under the stars, connecting settlements and carrying messages, trade, and rumours that reached foreign ears. Tartessos developed seafaring skills that allowed navigation along rivers and across coastal waters, linking their ports with distant Mediterranean cultures. Maritime trade enabled the exchange not only of metals, but also of cultural practices, religious ideas, and technological knowledge. This network of waterways and vessels allowed Tartessos to exert influence far greater than the size of its settlements might suggest. Visitors spoke of temples and sacred sites, their rituals strange and alluring, glimpsed only through the accounts of outsiders. Greek historians described elaborate offerings to deities, though the specifics remain mysterious. Archaeological traces suggest that sacred spaces were integrated into urban areas or near riverbanks, sites where wealth and piety intersected. Religion may have reinforced elite authority, legitimizing the power of rulers who controlled both material and spiritual wealth, even as the details of their rites have been lost to time. Phoenician traders and Greek travellers left fragments of correspondence and observation, offering tantalizing glimpses into a culture that remained largely veiled. References to Tartessos in ancient texts recount both its abundance and its enigmatic character, hinting at diplomacy, commerce, and possibly even political alliances with Mediterranean powers. Yet these narratives are filtered through outsiders, creating a picture that is partial and distorted, a civilization known primarily through its impact on others, rather than through its own voice. In an instant, the cities fell silent, their people vanished or absorbed, leaving legends where records and stone once stood. The causes remain unclear, River silting, environmental shifts, or incursions by neighbouring tribes may have contributed to the kingdom's collapse. The disappearance was thorough enough that Tartessos became a mythic memory, referenced only in the writings of those who had traded or travelled with its people. No continuous urban record survives, leaving the civilization's ultimate fate suspended between speculation and fragmentary evidence. A kingdom both brilliant and elusive is suggested by the fragments of metalwork and ceramics that remain for modern eyes. Archaeological sites along the Guadalquivir and surrounding regions have yielded materials suggestive of urban life, trade and wealth, yet no site can be conclusively identified as Tartessos. Every discovery opens new questions. Which riverbank held the royal palace? Where were the workshops? And how did this culture vanish so completely from memory? Each artifact is a whisper of what was, a trace that suggests greatness now lost to time. Tartessos survives in memory and myth, a civilization glimpsed through stories, coins and glimmering metals that defy full explanation. Its legacy lingers in Iberian legend, in the tales carried across the Mediterranean, and in the faint metallic traces of wealth that hint at a society once radiant and powerful, yet almost entirely erased. Scholars continue to piece together fragments, but every answer leads to deeper mysteries, leaving the civilization suspended in an eternal state of allure and uncertainty. The waters and sands of southern Iberia keep the true story of Tartessos hidden, whispering only to those who search beyond the horizon. The lost civilization of the Lycians. Carved into cliffs and perched above jagged seas, the cities of the Lycians once commanded both awe and secrecy. Travellers in antiquity spoke of settlements clinging to rocky promontories, their terraces and stairways winding into the mountains like veins in stone. Few records describe the civilization from its own perspective, and much of what is known comes from Greek historians and inscriptions left upon tombs. The Lycians flourished for centuries in the rugged landscapes of southern Anatolia, shaping a society that was as much a product of its cliffs and valleys as it was of human ingenuity. Mountain ridges and coastal gorges dictated where settlements could rise, shaping lives in isolation and defence. Valleys choked with dense forests, high plateaus and jagged cliffs offered protection from invaders, but also demanded careful planning for water, food and movement. Villages and cities were rarely expansive. They adapted to contours, spreading across terraces and into natural alcoves. The terrain itself became both refuge and constraint, forging a people whose survival depended on skill, vigilance, and intimate knowledge of the land. In the face of stone walls, tombs were hewn directly from cliffs, each a silent testament to beliefs and social hierarchy. Lycian tombs, often shaped like small houses or monumental sarcophagi, rose above valleys like sentinels, guarding the memory of kings, nobles, and warriors. Carvings depict mythic scenes and ancestral lineage, hinting at a worldview that revered both the living and the dead. These monuments, many of which still cling precariously to cliff faces, suggest that the Lycians placed extraordinary emphasis on the journey beyond life, making the dead permanent participants in the landscape. Streets and houses conformed to steep slopes, with terraces and steps guiding movement through a city seemingly grown from rock itself. Urban planning was less about geometric precision than harmony with topography, creating labyrinthine paths and interlocking terraces that served both practical and defensive purposes. Archaeologists have found remains of stone foundations, cisterns and workshops embedded into hillsides, offering glimpses of a society where every stone had a purpose and every path was carefully considered. Kings ruled alongside councils, navigating alliances and conflicts with neighbours, while preserving autonomy in a landscape few could traverse. Despite the isolation imposed by cliffs and valleys, Lycia maintained connections with Greek colonies and larger empires, balancing submission and resistance. Leadership involved negotiation as well as defence, and inscriptions suggest that diplomacy was conducted through both marriages and formal agreements, preserving a measure of stability in an environment of constant threat. Art and inscriptions adorned walls and sarcophagi, capturing both myth and memory in carved reliefs and hieroglyphs. Figures of warriors, ships and deities reveal a culture attuned to both martial prowess and spiritual life. Though the Lycians left no extensive historical narrative, these fragments speak of a civilization that sought to immortalize identity and achievement in stone. Each carving, each inscription, offers a glimpse into values, hierarchy, and the imagination of a people intertwined with the cliffs they inhabited. Persian armies, Greek colonists, and neighbouring tribes all left marks on Lycia, yet the civilization endured through adaptability and resistance. The Lycians became known for their skill in warfare, especially in mountain combat, and for their strategic settlements that allowed them to withstand external pressures for centuries. While conquest and cultural exchange inevitably altered aspects of their society, the core identity of Lycia persisted, resiliently tied to its dramatic terrain. Gradually, settlements were abandoned or absorbed, leaving terraces empty, walls silent, and tombs as the sole witnesses to vanished lives. Environmental changes, shifting trade routes, and the pressures of foreign domination contributed to the decline, though the precise timeline remains uncertain. Many cities were left to crumble, and the Lycians' unique system of cliffside urbanism slowly disappeared from the living memory of the region. Only the tombs and scattered inscriptions continued to mark their presence in the landscape. Stairways, inscriptions, and reliefs emerge under archaeologists' hands, hinting at daily life, religious practice, and governance. Though vast gaps persist, excavations reveal glimpses of household objects, pottery, and communal spaces, but the stories of families, merchants, and soldiers are largely lost. Each discovery brings new understanding alongside fresh mysteries, a civilization glimpsed in fragments that never fully coalesce into a complete narrative. Lycia endures in shadow and stone, its people and culture preserved in tombs and ruins that inspire wonder and speculation. Modern visitors who traverse the cliffs encounter not just architectural marvels, but an atmosphere of isolation and quiet power, as if the land itself keeps the memory of the Lycians alive. Every relief, every stairway, every abandoned terrace evokes a culture that once thrived at the edge of the world, now vanished but never entirely forgotten. The cliffs still echo the secrets of the Lycians, holding their stories in silence against the wind and the waves. The Kingdom of Punt. Egyptian scribes and artists recorded a land of unimaginable wealth, a realm known as Punt, where gold, incense, and ebony were gathered for the gods. Its presence dominates temple reliefs from the reigns of Hatshepsut and Thutmose III, where ships return laden with rare animals, fragrant resins, and exotic wood. Yet the civilization itself is seen only through these distant eyes, filtered by ritual and reverence. Punt was a kingdom both real and mythic, a place whose riches and mystery captured the imagination of one of history's most enduring civilizations. Its precise location has long eluded historians, stretching along the Red Sea or deep into the Horn of Africa, shrouded in mist and conjecture. Scholars debate whether Punt lay in present-day Eritrea, Somalia, or Sudan, and no definitive archaeological site has been confirmed. Rivers, mountains, and deserts complicate every expedition, while shifting coastlines and ancient trade routes obscure the paths once traversed by Puntite sailors and Egyptian envoys. Even the Egyptians, meticulous record keepers, left only tantalizing hints of geography. Merchants and sailors described treasures that flowed from Punt's forests and mountains, carried across rivers and deserts to the temples of pharaohs. Gold dust, aromatic resins, ebony logs, ivory tusks, and live exotic animals were the most coveted exports, yet they reveal only a fraction of Punt's economy. These commodities suggest a sophisticated system of production, collection, and transport, managed by a society capable of coordinating resources across tropical forests and rugged terrain. Each cargo was a bridge between the enigmatic lands of Punt and the ceremonial courts of Egypt. Expeditions travelled under sun and storm, their ships laden with gifts and goods, guided by knowledge lost to the centuries. Reliefs depict vessels with sails and oars, packed with cargo and escorted by crews in ceremonial attire. Such journeys were both perilous and ritualized, intertwining trade with offerings to the gods. The preparation, logistics, and endurance required speak to the organization and influence of Puntite society, which could sustain interaction with a distant, powerful neighbor without losing its own identity. Leaders, traders, and priests appear in Egyptian reliefs, their features stylized yet hinting at a society structured to sustain trade and ritual. Puntite rulers oversaw collection, storage, and negotiation, maintaining relations with Egypt that were both economic and ceremonial. Religious practices appear intertwined with commerce, with offerings and tributes reinforcing political and spiritual authority. Though the Egyptians recorded only external appearances, the glimpses suggest a culture capable of complexity, strategy, and ceremony. Tribute and ritual exchange marked interactions with Egypt, embedding Punt within the religious and economic imagination of the Nile civilization. Pharaohs commemorated successful expeditions in temple inscriptions, often presenting Puntite treasures as offerings to gods. These records blur the line between diplomacy, devotion, and commerce, illustrating a kingdom whose significance extended beyond material wealth to encompass symbolism, prestige, and divine favour. Punt existed as both a physical and ideological space in the Egyptian worldview. Forests, rivers, and wildlife shaped every aspect of Punt's culture, providing both sustenance and exotic commodities sought across the Mediterranean. Dense forests supplied resins and ebony, rivers teemed with fish and watercraft routes, and surrounding savannas offered ivory and game. The environment dictated settlement patterns, transport, and subsistence strategies, forging a society attuned to its natural surroundings. These ecological conditions also contributed to Punt's later elusiveness, as shifting climates and landscapes may have erased the precise traces of habitation. Eventually, Punt vanished from Egyptian records, leaving no continuous settlements and only fragmentary impressions of its people and land. Whether absorbed by neighbouring powers, abandoned due to environmental pressures, or transformed through migration, the kingdom disappeared from view. The absence of first-hand Puntite documents leaves historians dependent on external accounts, which emphasise material wealth and ceremonial significance while leaving the people themselves largely silent. Archaeologists search for traces, fragments of resin, ivory or gold, each a faint echo of a kingdom glimpsed only through foreign eyes. Excavations in the Horn of Africa and along the southern Red Sea have yielded tantalising clues, yet nothing conclusively identifies Punt. Reliefs, inscriptions, and imported goods in Egypt remain the primary evidence, offering glimpses of trade, ritual, and cultural exchange, while leaving vast gaps in understanding. Each artifact becomes a fragmentary window into a vanished society. Punt survives in temple reliefs, hieroglyphs, and legend, an enduring enigma that continues to challenge the boundary between history and myth. Scholars reconstruct its existence from what outsiders recorded, balancing imagination and evidence. The kingdom's people, lands, and practices remain elusive, yet their impact resonates through the wealth, stories, and rituals they inspired across the Nile for centuries. The sands, rivers, and forests of Africa still guard the secrets of Punt, offering only whispers to those who seek its vanished kingdoms. The Olmec shadow in Mesoamerica. Massive stone heads stare across the centuries, remnants of a civilization known as the Olmecs, whose art and ritual shaped Mesoamerica. Though they lived along the Gulf Coast of present-day Mexico, their presence looms far beyond the lowlands they occupied. Archaeologists and historians recognize them as a mother culture, one that transmitted ideas, iconography, and ceremonial practices to successive civilizations. Yet the Olmecs themselves remain shrouded in mystery, their society glimpsed only through colossal sculptures, ceremonial centers, and enigmatic symbols etched into stone. Rivers and tropical lowlands cradled their settlements, nourishing both maize and the cultural imagination that would endure for millennia. Fertile soils along the Coatzacoalcos and Papaloapan rivers allowed for agricultural surpluses, supporting dense populations and ceremonial life. Seasonal floods and dense vegetation dictated where settlements arose, compelling the Olmecs to manipulate their environment with causeways, raised platforms, and levees. The land itself became a stage for monumental expression and ritual practice, shaping both daily life and long-term societal organization. From basalt and jade, colossal heads, thrones, and figurines emerge, bearing witness to technical mastery and a society that valued symbolism above all. These heads, some weighing tens of tons, depict rulers or deities with individualized features, suggesting both reverence and the assertion of political authority. Jade figurines and ceremonial objects reveal expertise in carving and material selection, while motifs such as jaguars and serpents hint at spiritual beliefs that continue to intrigue scholars. Each artifact carries both aesthetic mastery and the weight of cultural memory. Trade networks extended far beyond Olmec heartlands, revealing a civilization deeply connected to distant regions. Archaeological evidence indicates that Olmec jade, obsidian, and ceramics travelled hundreds of kilometres, reaching sites in the highlands and along the Pacific coast. River systems and overland routes facilitated these exchanges, suggesting sophisticated logistical knowledge and social organisation. Exotic materials such as magnetite and serpentine were crafted into ritual objects, while the presence of cacao residues hints at early agricultural experimentation and ceremonial consumption. These networks not only disseminated goods but also ideas, spreading Olmec religious motifs, artistic techniques, and cultural influence across Mesoamerica long before the rise of the Maya and Zapotec civilizations. Ceremonial centers rose with plazas, mounds, and avenues, creating spaces where rulers, priests, and commoners intersected in ritual and governance. Sites such as San Lorenzo, La Venta, and Tres Zapotes reveal meticulously planned layouts, with pyramidal mounds aligned to rivers and cosmic markers. Central plazas provided arenas for communal gathering, ceremonies, and offerings, while elevated mounds may have signalled the status of elites or hosted rituals. These centres functioned as both spiritual and political hubs, anchoring the surrounding population through collective practice and awe-inspiring architecture. Elites and spiritual leaders likely guided both political and ceremonial life, their authority etched into stone and implied in spatial organisation. The Olmecs left no written record in the conventional sense, yet their monuments, reliefs and urban planning suggest complex governance structures. Priest-kings or ritual specialists may have mediated between the material and spiritual worlds, directing ceremonies that reinforce social hierarchies. Symbolic carvings indicate a hierarchy intertwined with ritual, in which power and belief were inseparable. Jaguar motifs, offerings of jade, and carved altars hint at a cosmology and ritual practice whose full meaning remains inaccessible. Religious life appears to have emphasized transformation, duality, and communication with unseen forces, as evidenced by iconography that blends human, animal, and supernatural elements. Altars, caches, and ceremonial deposits provide glimpses of sacrificial practices, feasting, and ritualized display, yet the exact purposes and narratives behind these acts are lost to time. The Olmec imprint extends into the Maya and Zapotec worlds, transmitting iconography, religious concepts, and artistic conventions across centuries. Later civilizations inherited symbolic language, calendar systems, and ceremonial motifs first cultivated in Olmec centers. Even in their decline, the Olmecs' influence persisted in temple design, monumental sculpture, and sacred iconography, demonstrating a legacy that surpasses the physical boundaries of their vanished cities. By 400 BCE, Olmec centers were abandoned, their people dispersed, leaving monumental art behind but few records of social continuity. Reasons for decline remain speculative. Environmental change, flooding, political fragmentation, or resource depletion may have contributed. While some settlements may have persisted in smaller forms, the great ceremonial hubs ceased to function, and the Olmec civilization faded from direct memory, leaving behind an enigmatic shadow for future generations to study. Excavations uncover looted mounds, ceremonial artifacts, and traces of settlements, each revealing both mastery and the enduring gaps in understanding. Archaeologists continue to piece together networks of trade, agriculture, and ritual, reconstructing daily life and societal priorities from shards, fragments, and remnants of monumental works. Every discovery illuminates only a fragment of a civilization that once flourished, leaving scholars to interpret culture through stone, clay, and iconography alone. Olmec civilization survives in the shadow of its own monuments, a culture glimpsed through artistry and influence yet never fully understood. Their colossal heads, intricate reliefs, and ceremonial mounds remain as silent witnesses to a society that shaped the foundations of Mesoamerican identity. The civilization's achievements endure in the echoes of architecture, symbolism, and cultural memory, yet the people who carved, worshipped, and lived within these centers remain lost to history. The stone faces remain, silently observing the forests and rivers, guardians of secrets no scholar has yet unveiled. The Kingdom of Axum. Towering obelisks mark the memory of a kingdom known as Axum, a power that commanded trade and faith across the Horn of Africa. Its influence spread from fertile highlands to Red Sea ports, reaching merchants, pilgrims and diplomats far beyond its borders. Though many of its monuments remain standing, the details of its society, its daily life, political machinations, and the rhythm of commerce remain partly obscured, leaving historians to reconstruct a civilization from inscriptions, coins, and the monumental stelae that pierce the skyline of the Ethiopian plateau. The highlands provided natural fortification and fertile soil, while the nearby Red Sea connected the kingdom to distant continents. Plateaus and escarpments created defensible settlements and productive farmland, supporting dense populations capable of sustaining monumental construction and extensive trade. The Red Sea offered maritime corridors to Arabia, India, and the wider Mediterranean world, allowing Aksum to thrive as a hub of goods, ideas, and religious influence. Geography itself became a partner in the kingdom's power, blending security with connectivity. Gold, ivory, and frankincense flowed from Aksum to Arabia, India, and beyond, carried along routes that combined river, land, and sea. Local crafts, exotic animals, and precious minerals joined these flows, supporting a sophisticated economy that attracted merchants and emissaries from distant lands. Markets, caravan stops, and port facilities in cities such as Adulis suggest a network of trade both organised and dynamic, capable of sustaining wealth and cultural exchange across challenging terrain. These exchanges not only circulated commodities, but also shaped diplomatic and religious relationships that extended far beyond the kingdom's borders. Stelae and monumental palaces rose above the plateau, each a testament to rulers who sought both reverence and political dominion. Some stelae reach over 20 metres, intricately carved with emblems, inscriptions, and symbolic designs marking royal lineage and religious devotion. Palaces and administrative centres supported governance, ritual, and ceremonial display, underscoring the authority of kings who balanced the demands of trade, religion, and society. These structures continue to dominate the landscape, casting long shadows across the highlands and testifying to both ambition and ingenuity. Coins stamped with inscriptions circulated widely, signalling economic sophistication and a centralized authority capable of regulating trade. Aksumite currency, made of gold, silver, and bronze, bears images of kings and religious symbols, providing a rare glimpse into governance, economy, and ideology. The coins themselves travelled beyond the kingdom, discovered in Arabia, India, and even along the Mediterranean, marking the reach and reputation of Aksum across continents and oceans. They are tangible traces of a civilization that commanded both commerce and cultural respect. King Ezana's conversion to Christianity transformed the kingdom, leaving churches, inscriptions, and artistic expressions that blend old beliefs with new faith. Monuments and inscriptions recount the king's embrace of a faith that would endure for centuries, shaping rituals, architecture, and art. Early churches and rock-hewn structures suggest integration of religious devotion with public and royal life, while inscriptions chronicle alliances, conquests, and divine favour. The kingdom's embrace of Christianity marks one of the earliest adoptions of the faith in sub-Saharan Africa, adding both historical and spiritual significance to its story. Aksumite rulers negotiated alliances and rivalries, linking African interior states with Red Sea ports and even the distant Roman world. Records indicate correspondence with Rome and interactions with Arabian powers, reflecting both political ambition and economic strategy. Military campaigns, diplomacy, and marriage alliances extended influence while protecting trade networks, illustrating a kingdom adept at balancing internal cohesion with external pressures. Even as monuments and coins remain, much of the political narrative survives only in fragments, leaving gaps that invite speculation. By the 7th century, the kingdom's dominance waned, its cities quieter, trade diminished, and monumental edifices abandoned to time. Shifting climate patterns, silting of ports, and the rise of alternative trade corridors contributed to the decline, while internal political fragmentation may have weakened centralized authority. Though the memory of kings, priests, and merchants persisted, the once vibrant economy and cultural hub gradually receded into obscurity, leaving stone and coin as primary witnesses to a civilization whose decline is still incompletely understood. Archaeologists uncover stone foundations, imported artifacts, and remnants of urban planning, offering glimpses into a society of remarkable complexity. Excavations in Aksum, Adulis, and surrounding settlements reveal imported pottery, inscriptions, and architectural innovations that testify to both local ingenuity and foreign influence. Each discovery illuminates daily life, ceremonial practice, and commercial exchange. Yet the totality of Aksumite culture remains elusive, its narrative fractured by centuries of natural and human disruption. Aksum endures in memory, coins, and sacred sites, its people and culture partially obscured yet echoing through history. From monumental stelae to early Christian churches, every surviving artifact conveys both authority and enigma. The kingdom's achievements in trade, religion, and statecraft continue to inspire awe, even as the lives of the people who built, worshipped, and governed remain largely invisible beyond stone and inscription. The winds of the Ethiopian highlands whisper stories of kings, traders, and faith long vanished beneath the sun-baked stones of Aksum. The Nok culture of West Africa. Terracotta figures emerge from the soil, silent witnesses to the Nok culture, one of West Africa's earliest known societies. Flourishing between 1000 BCE and 300 CE, the Nok are remembered primarily through their intricate clay sculptures and early ironworking technology. These artifacts suggest a people both innovative and expressive, yet the society itself remains enigmatic, leaving archaeologists and historians to reconstruct daily life, social organization, and ritual practice from fragments of material culture. Every figure and tool hints at a civilization that thrived and vanished long before written records could capture its story. Savanna plains and scattered forests provided both sustenance and concealment, shaping settlements that remain only partially uncovered. Small villages and farmsteads dotted the fertile lands of modern Nigeria, exploiting seasonal rains to cultivate millet, yams, and other crops. Rivers and streams facilitated local travel and resource distribution, while dense vegetation concealed settlements from potential rivals. The interplay between environment and human adaptation offers a glimpse into how the Nok maintained stability and developed technological innovations in a challenging landscape. Iron tools and furnaces hint at advanced metallurgical knowledge, a technology that transformed agriculture, hunting, and social cohesion. Evidence of smelting sites, iron implements, and furnaces indicates that the Nok mastered the extraction and manipulation of metal centuries before many other regions of sub-Saharan Africa. Axes, chisels, and hoes improved farming efficiency and construction, while iron weaponry may have reinforced social hierarchies and territorial control. The presence of iron in everyday life suggests a society that integrated technological skill with both survival and status. From clay emerged haunting sculptures of human faces and animals, meticulously shaped yet enigmatic in purpose and meaning. Terracotta heads, often hollow and imposing, display individualized features, expressive eyes, and intricate hairstyles, hinting at social roles, identity, or ritual significance. Animal figures and figurative scenes, carefully modeled, may reflect myths, spiritual beliefs, or societal values. The craftsmanship conveys not only technical skill but a worldview encoded in form, offering a rare window into a people who left no written record. The arrangement of settlements and burial sites suggests a society organized by hierarchy, ritual, and kinship, though details remain speculative. Excavations reveal clusters of homes surrounding communal spaces, with burial deposits occasionally accompanied by terracotta figures and iron implements. These patterns imply social stratification, possibly with leaders or ritual specialists directing labour, ceremonies, and production. While the exact roles and governance remain unclear, material evidence indicates a society capable of coordinated effort and cultural expression beyond subsistence survival. Trade networks carried iron, pottery, and other goods to neighbouring regions, implying communication and exchange beyond local villages. Artifacts discovered hundreds of kilometres from Nok heartland suggest interaction with contemporaneous communities across West Africa. Rivers, paths, and perhaps rudimentary roads facilitated the movement of raw materials and finished goods, allowing ideas, techniques, and symbolic motifs to travel alongside physical items. Such exchanges reveal a civilization not isolated but deeply enmeshed in regional social and economic networks. Terracotta and ritual deposits may have marked spiritual or ceremonial life, preserving beliefs that cannot be fully interpreted today. Objects buried in mounds or beneath dwellings hint at practices intended to ensure fertility, protect the community, or honour ancestors. The meaning of many figurines, gestures, and poses remains unknown, yet the care with which they were created and positioned suggests profound symbolic or religious significance. These silent witnesses evoke a worldview encoded in clay, iron, and earth, resisting complete understanding across millennia. By the early centuries CE, Nok settlements were abandoned or transformed, leaving no written record and few clues as to why. Environmental changes, overexploitation of resources, social disruption, or shifts in trade networks may have contributed to the decline, but certainty is elusive. The culture's disappearance left behind impressive artifacts, yet no continuous narrative, creating a chasm between the civilization's technological and artistic achievements and the humans who crafted them. Archaeologists excavate scattered mounds and artifact caches, slowly piecing together a culture whose art and metallurgy testify to sophistication and ingenuity. Modern research relies on careful stratigraphy, carbon dating, and comparative analysis with neighbouring societies. Each discovery, whether a terracotta head, an iron tool, or traces of a settlement, adds clarity yet deepens the mystery of the Nok social organisation, belief systems, and ultimate fate. The scattered remnants continue to challenge conventional narratives of African prehistory. The Nok culture survives in terracotta, iron, and memory, its people invisible yet leaving traces that challenge understanding and spark enduring questions. Their artistry and technological skill echo through West Africa, influencing later civilizations while remaining profoundly enigmatic. Even as scholars reconstruct patterns of life, the people themselves exist only in the shadow of their creations, reminding the world of a society both innovative and elusive. The earth holds their faces and tools, silent testimonies to a people whose story remains half buried beneath the West African sun. The Ancestral Puebloans. Cliff faces rise like silent guardians over valleys where the ancestral Puebloans once lived, their dwellings carved into stone as if to endure eternity. Across what is now the American Southwest, these people built homes, ceremonial spaces, and entire communities in the recesses of canyons and atop mesas, leaving behind structures whose precision and permanence suggest both ingenuity and deep social cohesion. Though many of their settlements were eventually abandoned, the remnants stand as enduring testaments to a civilization whose daily life and disappearance continue to puzzle archaeologists. The Colorado Plateau, with mesas and canyons, shaped both the imagination and survival strategies of these people, demanding ingenuity in agriculture and construction. Arid climate, fluctuating rainfall, and challenging terrain necessitated careful planning in choosing dwelling sites, cultivating crops, and storing water. The interplay between environment and human adaptation gave rise to an architectural style both functional and monumental, harmonizing with the landscape while asserting human presence in an unforgiving region. Multi-story masonry homes and complexes in Chaco Canyon and Mesa Verde reveal architectural mastery that balance community needs, defense, and environmental constraints. Rooms were carefully stacked, with thick walls of sandstone and mortar creating stability, insulation, and communal cohesion. Some complexes contained hundreds of rooms, accommodating extended families and serving as administrative and ceremonial centres. The scale and durability of these constructions reflect advanced engineering skills and a capacity for coordinated labour across generations. Kivas, circular subterranean chambers, served as centres of ritual, astronomy, and communal decision-making, linking daily life to the cosmos. Carefully constructed with stone walls and timber supports, these spaces often featured hearths, ventilation shafts, and niches for ritual objects. Alignment with celestial events suggests that astronomy and timekeeping were woven into religious and social life, guiding planting, harvesting, and ceremonial observances. The Kiva's presence within both small villages and large complexes underscores their central role in community identity. Dry farming techniques, water conservation, and granaries demonstrate a deep understanding of the harsh desert climate, sustaining populations across centuries. The ancestral Puebloans cultivated maize, beans, and squash using terraces, check dams, and irrigation channels to manage scarce water. Storage pits and elevated granaries preserved crops against drought and spoilage, while controlled use of soil and compost maintained fertility. These agricultural strategies enabled settlements to persist in a region where rainfall was unpredictable and the land often unforgiving. Stone roads stretch across valleys and mesas, connecting settlements and ceremonial hubs, hinting at trade, pilgrimage, or coordinated social networks. Some roads extend dozens of kilometers, often straight and clearly defined, linking distant pueblos with central ceremonial sites. These routes facilitated the movement of goods, people, and information, suggesting a culture attentive to connectivity and social cohesion across wide geographic areas. The roads, like the dwellings themselves, endure as markers of planning and purpose. Pottery, carved stone, and ornaments speak to symbolic expression and identity, preserving glimpses of a culture otherwise mute to history. Painted motifs, geometric designs, and effigy figures appear across domestic and ceremonial contexts, suggesting shared aesthetics and symbolic systems. These artifacts, while functional, also convey meaning, serving as markers of status, belief, or affiliation. The interplay of art and utility demonstrates a society attuned to both the practical and the expressive. Petroglyphs etched into canyon walls offer glimpses into a visual language of ritual, astronomy, and memory, preserving stories that survive only in stone. These carvings depict animals, human figures, abstract patterns, and celestial motifs, sometimes aligned with solar and lunar events. They may have served as calendars, spiritual symbols, or territorial markers, providing a rare insight into cognitive and ceremonial life otherwise invisible in the archaeological record. The placement of these images, high on cliff faces or near ceremonial sites, suggests deliberate intention, a silent communication spanning generations. By the late 13th century, many settlements were abandoned, leaving only empty dwellings, silent kivas, and questions about climate, conflict, or social upheaval. Evidence of drought, resource depletion, or territorial pressures may have contributed to migrations, yet no single explanation accounts for the widespread exodus. The suddenness and scale of abandonment amplify the mystery, transforming once thriving villages into relics that echo with absence and the fragility of human endeavour. Excavations reveal layers of habitation, artifacts, and architectural planning, yet much of daily life remains invisible, known only through inference and the arrangement of space. Archaeologists interpret soil layers, tool remnants, and structural features to reconstruct diet, labour, and social hierarchy. Each discovery provides insight while leaving unanswered questions about governance, belief, and interpersonal dynamics. The incomplete record ensures that the ancestral Puebloans continue to exist in the imagination as much as in stone. The ancestral Puebloans endure in the memory of their descendants, in the stone structures that pierce canyons, and in mysteries that resist full explanation. From Chaco Canyon to Mesa Verde, their architectural and cultural achievements survive, silent yet eloquent, challenging observers to piece together a society whose innovation and abandonment are entwined in a narrative only partially recovered from the desert sands. The mesas and cliffs whisper of lives meticulously ordered and suddenly abandoned, leaving the desert to guard their secrets in silence. The vanished builders of Teotihuacan. Beneath the highland sky of central Mexico, where volcanic peaks pierce the horizon and the valley stretches wide in shadow and sun, a city arose unlike any other in the Americas. Its vast avenues and monumental pyramids spoke of a civilization that thrived long before the rise of the Aztecs, yet today its craters remain nameless and nearly forgotten. Teotihuacan, as the Aztecs would later call it, was not simply a settlement but a meticulously planned metropolis. Its streets aligned with celestial cycles, its structures echoing patterns of the stars. Scholars have puzzled over the identity of the people who raised it, for no inscriptions reveal their rulers, and their language has vanished completely from history. The city's scale alone attests to an extraordinary social organisation. The Avenue of the Dead stretches over 2 kilometres, flanked by apartment compounds and ceremonial complexes, its central axis pointing toward the sacred mountains that cradle the valley. Each building reflects both practical engineering and symbolic precision. The Pyramid of the Sun rises to nearly 70 metres, constructed from millions of tons of stone and earth, and yet its summit reveals no traces of a royal tomb, leaving questions about the nature of leadership and ritual in this vanished society. Around it, smaller pyramids and plazas align with the movements of the sun and moon, suggesting a culture deeply attuned to cosmic rhythms. Archaeological discoveries have uncovered bustling neighbourhoods filled with multi-family compounds, workshops and murals that depict priests, jaguars and mythic beings. These murals offer a glimpse into beliefs and rituals, yet the absence of personal names or dynastic records leaves a haunting void. Objects of obsidian and pottery hint at far-reaching trade networks, reaching the Gulf Coast, Oaxaca and beyond, implying a civilization of influence and ambition. Teotihuacan was not isolated. It was a hub of economic, religious and cultural exchange, a city whose very layout enforced social order and ritual hierarchy. Despite its grandeur, the city was abandoned abruptly around the 7th century. Evidence of fire scars on the central complexes suggests violent upheaval, yet scholars debate whether the collapse was due to internal revolt, environmental stress, or a combination of pressures. The population, once perhaps as high as 125,000, disappeared from the plazas and streets, leaving behind the monumental forms they had perfected. Subsequent civilizations, including the Toltecs and later the Aztecs, discovered the ruins and built myths around them, calling them the birthplace of gods, a city constructed not by mortal hands but by beings whose memory had been swallowed by time. Among the lingering enigmas is the purpose and construction of the Pyramid of the Moon, which mirrors the surrounding Cerro Gordo and other mountains, linking earth and architecture in ways that remain incompletely understood. The burials beneath its layers, containing offerings of obsidian knives, shells and ceramics, suggest a ritualistic focus on death, renewal and the fertility of the valley. The scale of labour and planning required to assemble such monuments implies a population organised around more than survival. Their lives were dominated by ceremony, observation of the heavens, and possibly a sophisticated calendrical system that dictated the rhythm of the city. Teotihuacan's artisans demonstrated mastery in stone and pigment. Murals still preserve vibrant reds, blues and yellows, portraying processions, deities and abstract symbols. Sculpted masks, often made of jade, greenstone or obsidian, were found not as funerary objects but as ritual offerings, hinting at a worldview where art, devotion and power were inseparable. Even the city's residential compounds were designed with shared courtyards, ventilation systems, and spatial divisions that speak to an intricate understanding of communal life, social regulation, and engineering that rivaled civilizations across the globe. Yet for all this evidence of sophistication, the identity of Teotihuacan's rulers and the mechanisms of its sudden collapse remain elusive. Unlike the later Maya or Aztec civilizations, no surviving texts or codices name kings or record dynastic events. Their language has left no trace, and their traditions vanished from oral memory. Scholars rely on architecture, art, and artifacts, piecing together fragments of a story that remains largely incomplete. The absence of written records enhances the city's spectral presence. It is a metropolis preserved in stone and dust, monumental yet mute, a ghost of human ambition frozen in time. Teotihuacan's influence persisted long after its abandonment, inspiring later cultures in central Mexico and leaving marks on architecture, urban planning, and ritual practice. But its builders themselves disappeared, swallowed by the valley and the centuries, their names erased, their stories untold. Every excavation reveals fragments of life, hints of governance, glimpses of belief, but none explain why a city of such magnitude could be vacated so completely. The grandeur remains, but the human pulse that once animated it is irretrievably gone, leaving only shadows among the pyramids and the silent sweep of the Avenue of the Dead. No one knows who walked those streets first, nor why they left. The ghost cities of the Khmer Empire. Through thick vines and towering kapok trees, stone spires pierce the canopy, their surfaces mottled with moss and shadow. Hidden among the dense forests of modern-day Cambodia, the remnants of a vast civilization emerge in fragments, silently resisting time and nature. Temples rise like petrified sentinels, their tiers and terraces still aligned with sacred cosmology, while collapsed walls and shattered lintels hint at once thriving cities now reclaimed by the jungle. Even in decay, the scale of construction evokes meticulous planning and extraordinary labour, a testament to a society whose name echoes faintly in the ruins and in the whispers of history. One of the most sophisticated civilizations in Southeast Asia, had already been established by the Khmer Empire long before European explorers arrived. Centred around Angkor, it flourished between the 9th and 15th centuries, dominating the region through a network of cities, temples and agricultural innovation. Kings such as Suryavarman II and Jayavarman VII commissioned monumental works that fused political authority with religious devotion, yet the reasons for the empire's ultimate retreat from its urban heart remain obscure. The vastness of Angkor itself, stretching over hundreds of square kilometres, suggests a complexity that rivals any contemporary civilization in the world. Canals, reservoirs and causeways crisscrossed the city like veins, carrying water and life through a metropolis carefully tuned to the monsoon. The Beret reservoirs, massive artificial lakes, regulated irrigation and supported rice cultivation that could sustain a dense population. Stone-lined channels diverted water with precision, connecting urban cores to temple compounds and rural landscapes. Angkor's streets were not haphazard, they reflected a sophisticated understanding of hydraulics, urban planning and engineering. Even the placement of temples corresponded to cosmological principles, mirroring Mount Meru, the axis of the universe in Khmer belief, and integrating the sacred into the rhythm of daily life. It is estimated that at its height, Angkor may have supported hundreds of thousands of inhabitants, yet their names and daily lives remain largely unknown. Multi-storey dwellings, built from laterite and timber, have vanished under centuries of tropical decay, leaving only the footprints of foundations and courtyards. Labourers, artisans, priests and administrators worked within a hierarchy that facilitated monumental construction and ritual observance, yet no record survived to illuminate the complexities of governance or the personalities behind the empire's achievements. The population was vast and diverse, but for all their numbers, the people themselves have been swallowed by time. Faces carved into stone towers watch silently over empty courtyards, their enigmatic expressions hinting at beliefs that governed a vanished society. The Bayon Temple's smiling stone faces remain inscrutable, observing the forest as it encroaches, while bas-reliefs depict processions, battles and religious rites that can be partially interpreted yet never fully explained. Temples were more than monuments. They were symbolic centres of power and devotion, carefully oriented and constructed to reflect both cosmic order and the authority of the king. The carvings, though weathered, testify to artistic and spiritual sophistication unmatched in the region. Roots split masonry and birds circle shattered lintels, while the jungle advances inch by inch into the forgotten avenues. Trees and vines pry apart the city's foundations, and moss blankets every surface, obscuring human intention beneath a veneer of green. The roar of insects and the rustle of leaves fill courtyards once thronged with life, leaving an eerie quiet where ceremonies and trade once thrived. Nature does not merely cover these ruins, it consumes them, reshaping human architecture into forms that are alien yet strangely harmonious with the original design. Archaeologists debate whether overpopulation, climate change, or internecine strife prompted the empire's sudden retreat from these cities. Evidence of droughts, reduced crop yields, and internal revolts suggests that the decline was multifaceted, yet no single cause is universally accepted. The abrupt abandonment of urban centres and the fading of monumental construction leave unanswered questions. How could such a powerful and innovative society relinquish its heart without leaving more tangible traces? Every excavation reveals fragments of urban life, yet the overall story of decline remains elusive. In scattered inscriptions and ritual fragments, echoes of Khmer knowledge survive, suggesting a legacy that extended far beyond these ruins. Scripts carved into stone record decrees and religious observances, while portable objects like bronze statues and ceramics hint at trade and daily practices. Even the architectural influence of Angkor reverberated across Southeast Asia, informing urban design, religious architecture, and hydraulic engineering in later periods. Yet the people who commissioned these works, walked these streets, and tended these canals remain anonymous, their presence sensed only in the silence between trees. Modern technology has revealed hidden canals and terraces beneath the forest floor, uncovering secrets the trees had long concealed. LiDAR mapping has shown that Angkor was far more extensive than previously believed, with urban grids and water systems extending well beyond the temple complexes visible to the naked eye. These discoveries deepen the sense of mystery, a city of extraordinary scale, meticulously planned and yet lost, existing now as echoes beneath forest cover, waiting for the light to reveal fragments of a vanished world. Where once the capital pulsed with ritual and commerce, only silence remains, broken by the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant cry of a gibbon. The ghost cities endure in the imagination and the ruins alike, monuments to human ambition, devotion and ingenuity that time has reclaimed almost entirely. Leaving the jungle to claim their empire in quiet secrecy, no one can say why the rivers ran dry, the temples emptied, or the people vanished. The unknown builders of Nan Madol. Mist rises from the lagoon, blurring the line between water and stone as tiny islets emerge from the morning haze. The city floats upon the Pacific shallows, its ruins scattered across a labyrinth of canals and basalt platforms. Even in decay, the scale of human ambition is unmistakable. Crumbling walls and toppled stones hint at ceremonial centres and dwellings, while narrow causeways stretch like veins between islands that were meticulously arranged. The air carries the salt and warmth of the ocean, and the rhythmic lap of waves against stone seems almost intentional, as if the city itself were attuned to the tides. In a time before written records arrived in this corner of Oceania, a people built a metropolis that appears to float over water and reef. Its creators left no written chronicles, no inscriptions to mark kings or priests. The earliest references, recorded by later Pacific Islanders, speak only in legend and song of a vanished people who once ruled the lagoon with unparalleled skill. The city, known today as Nan Madol, covers more than 80 man-made islets, each composed of basalt logs, some weighing multiple tons, carefully stacked to form platforms, walls, and ceremonial grounds. The arrangement suggests deliberate planning, not random settlement, though the identity of its architects has vanished from history. Thousands of basalt columns were quarried, shaped and transported across channels that separate each islet. How the builders moved stones of such immense weight remains one of the region's enduring enigmas. Some suggest that logs were floated along the lagoon, guided by tides and labouring hands, while others propose more sophisticated techniques lost to time. The very effort required to construct Nan Madol in a remote and delicate environment implies a society with organisation, discipline and knowledge far beyond what casual observation might suggest. Every foundation and terrace seems to reflect both practical engineering and ritual significance, a testament to ingenuity now silent beneath the sun. Causeways link rectangular islets in a deliberate pattern, separating zones that may have housed rulers, priests and common inhabitants. Some platforms are fortified with walls rising several metres, while others contain the remains of dwellings or ceremonial spaces. Central islets appear to have served as political or religious hubs, yet the absence of records leaves all speculation incomplete. The spatial organisation indicates careful thought about hierarchy, ritual and access, revealing a civilization that imposed order upon both water and stone. On these scattered islets, archaeologists estimate that several thousand people once lived, working, worshipping and navigating a city without conventional roads. Food production likely relied on both lagoon resources and cultivation on nearby fertile land, supported by intricate systems of canals and causeways that facilitated transport and irrigation. Daily life would have been governed by tides, season and labour cycles, a rhythm dictated not by clocks but by the natural environment and communal coordination. Yet even with these inferences, the people of Nan Madol remain faceless, their names and stories lost to time. Artefacts scattered across the islets hint at ritual and governance. Stone tools, carved idols and remnants of ceremonial platforms point to practices of religion, hierarchy and social cohesion. Unlike many ancient cities, Nan Madol offers little evidence of monumental tombs or grand palaces. Its mystery lies as much in what is absent as in what survives. The islets themselves, raised above the water, may have functioned as markers of status, sacred space or practical living quarters, intertwining human endeavour with the rhythm of the ocean. Tides and currents were harnessed with channels and sluices, demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of hydrology. Water flowed through the city in patterns that appear almost intentional, keeping canals navigable and maintaining equilibrium between human settlement and the delicate marine ecosystem. Such engineering suggests knowledge of maritime conditions, erosion, and coral foundations, an expertise that could have required generations of observation and practice. The builders were intimately connected to the water, yet what drove them to abandon it remains uncertain. By the 15th century, the islets were deserted. Causes of abandonment remained speculative, ranging from political upheaval to environmental changes, resource depletion, or social conflict. Whatever the reason, the city fell silent, leaving only basalt platforms and narrow channels behind. The ocean and wind began reclaiming what humans had so carefully shaped, washing surfaces smooth, toppling walls, and covering causeways with sand and silt. The grandeur of human endeavour stands in stark contrast to the ephemeral nature of its occupants. Recent surveys using aerial mapping and underwater exploration have revealed patterns of settlement, engineering, and ceremonial use hidden beneath vegetation and water. Yet every discovery deepens the mystery. Why did such an extraordinary city vanish without leaving a trace of its rulers, its culture, or its language? Nan Madol endures as both a marvel and a riddle, a ghost city whose stones are both testament and question. The basalt columns rise from the lagoon like frozen echoes, guarding a city that the world may never fully comprehend. The Nabatean enigma of Petra. Wind scours the rose-red cliffs, carving shadows into narrow canyons that conceal a city frozen in stone. Petra, hidden for centuries from all but local memory, emerges from the desert with a grandeur that defies its isolation. Its facades shimmer in the light, monumental tombs carved directly into cliffs, corridors that twist through gorges, and courtyards where commerce and ritual once intersected. The city seems alive yet silent, a place where the ingenuity of its builders is preserved in stone, and every carved detail hints at the lives of people now vanished from memory. The Nabateans, traders and desert dwellers, mastered both commerce and survival, yet their origins remain partly veiled in history. Rising to prominence in the first millennium BCE, they controlled trade networks that spanned Arabia, the Levant and Egypt, transporting incense, spices and other exotic goods. Petra was their jewel, the beating heart of a civilization that balanced the harshness of the desert with sophisticated urban planning. Despite their reach and influence, the Nabateans left few records of themselves, and the city's sudden decline leaves a haunting void in the narrative of human achievement. Facades and tombs emerge directly from the cliffs, their intricate carvings revealing artistry, religious symbolism, and a command of stone unmatched in the desert. The treasury, Al-Khazna, stands as both a tomb and a statement of authority, its columns, niches, and sculptural details crafted with precision that has confounded generations of travellers and archaeologists. Smaller tombs, colonnaded streets, and temples suggest a society that revered both the afterlife and civic presence, blending practicality with grandeur. Every surface seems intentional, designed to impress, commemorate, or communicate a meaning that has been lost with the passage of centuries. Channels, cisterns, and dams capture the scarce rainfall, sustaining life in an unforgiving landscape and demonstrating knowledge of engineering few contemporaries could match. The Nabateans harnessed the desert's intermittent water flows, constructing reservoirs capable of storing large volumes and distributing it throughout the city. Stone channels guided runoff, preventing erosion and flooding while enabling gardens, baths, and habitation. These hydraulic feats ensured Petra could thrive in one of the harshest climates of the ancient world, revealing a civilization intimately attuned to both geology and seasonal cycles. Caravans arrived from Arabia, Egypt, and the Levant, bearing incense, myrrh, and spices, their trade routes converging at the city's narrow gorges. Petra functioned as a commercial hub, a place where goods, wealth, and ideas intersected. Archaeological finds, including imported pottery, coins, and luxury items, suggest connections to cultures thousands of kilometers away. The city's position in the mountains and its network of paths allowed it to control trade, levy taxes, and maintain influence far beyond its immediate environs. Inscriptions and reliefs hint at a society that blended local traditions with Hellenistic and Eastern influences, leaving messages in stone and script that survive the centuries. Decorative motifs, statues, and carved symbols reflect religious practices, social hierarchy, and the merging of artistic styles across cultures. While the inscriptions provide glimpses into law, ritual, and daily life, much remains opaque. The voices of Petra's inhabitants are faint, filtered through the stone they left behind. estimates suggest tens of thousands once lived within Petra's valleys, their daily routines hidden in courtyards, streets, and the shadows of monumental tombs. Urban planning accommodated both population and commerce, with spaces dedicated to trade, worship, and governance. Streets guided movement through the city's natural contours, integrating architecture with terrain in a way that concealed both wealth and strategic planning from potential invaders. Despite the apparent sophistication, the people themselves have disappeared from written history, leaving behind only traces in the form of carved facades, streets, and waterworks. By the 3rd century CE, the city's prominence waned, abandoned to shifts in trade routes, seismic events, and the slow erosion of political influence. The bustling markets fell silent, temples were left to weather the desert winds, and monumental tombs stood empty, their occupants gone or unrecorded. Earthquakes fractured stone, and centuries of wind and sand gradually eroded surfaces once polished to brilliance. Petra's decline is visible, yet the reasons remain mysterious, a puzzle pieced together only partially through archaeology and conjecture. Modern excavations, coupled with drone surveys and 3D mapping, uncover hidden chambers, waterworks, and inscriptions that hint at lives once intertwined with commerce and ritual. Every new discovery deepens both understanding and mystery. Evidence of urban planning, hydraulic engineering, and art suggests a society of intelligence and sophistication, yet the complete story, the motivations, rulers, and ultimate fate of the people remains elusive. The city retains its presence as a monument not only to human achievement, but also to the secrets it guards. Even now, the city seems alive at dawn and dusk, as light spills into canyons and turns stone walls into ephemeral spectres of a vanished empire. Travellers passing through narrow gorges glimpse the facades emerging from shadows, and the faint echoes of water channels whisper the traces of a once vibrant civilization. Petra is both tangible and ephemeral, a desert ghost whose stories are half told in stone and half buried in sand. Petra endures in silence, its rose-red facades watching the desert winds, guarding secrets carved deep into stone that may never be deciphered. The Lycurgan Sparta. Stone-strewn hills and narrow valleys form the backdrop of a city that once revered order above all else. In the rugged terrain of Laconia, Sparta rose not through opulence or monuments, but through discipline, endurance, and a society forged to survive both nature and man. The city's layout, though modest in comparison to other Greek poleis, reflects a meticulous design intended to cultivate unity, military efficiency, and absolute conformity. Shadows of its streets, public squares, and training grounds whisper of a people whose lives were governed by law, ritual, and an unyielding sense of purpose. Sparta, governed by the laws of Lycurgus, moulded citizens into instruments of discipline and obedience, yet its origins and early codification remain partly obscured by legend. Lycurgus is said to have instituted reforms that transformed social, military, and political life, binding men and women alike to a rigid framework. The combination of monarchy, councils, and communal institutions created a society unlike any in ancient Greece. While historians debate the precise timeline and details of these reforms, the influence of Lycurgus persists in the archaeological and literary traces of Spartan life. From childhood, boys were enrolled in the agoge, enduring rigorous training that forged both body and psyche in preparation for a lifetime of service. The curriculum combined physical endurance, martial skill, and social conditioning, teaching obedience, resourcefulness, and loyalty to the polis above all else. Adolescents were subjected to harsh conditions, scarcity, and controlled competition, sharpening resilience and communal cohesion. This early education produced warriors capable of withstanding both the brutality of the battlefield and the pressures of Spartan society. 2 kings ruled alongside councils of elders, while helots laboured in the shadows, sustaining a society built upon the stark contrast of freedom and servitude. Helots, essentially bound agricultural labourers, outnumbered citizens yet were kept in strict subjugation to ensure Sparta's military dominance. Governance balanced monarchic authority with advisory councils, creating a system where law and martial obligation guided every action. Even as the city-state expanded its influence, its dependence on the labour of subjugated populations remained a silent underpinning of its survival. Stone walls, communal mess halls, and open training grounds testify to a city designed to cultivate unity, resilience, and martial prowess. Unlike the sprawling urban centres of Athens or Corinth, Sparta emphasised function over form, with spaces intended to reinforce discipline, shared responsibility, and military readiness. Structures were durable yet austere, reflecting the societal ethos that beauty was subordinate to utility and the collective good eclipsed individual desire. Religious rites and public festivals punctuated the Spartan calendar, reinforcing civic identity and devotion to ancestral laws. Rituals dedicated to deities like Artemis or Thea and Apollo served both spiritual and social purposes, ensuring cohesion and continuity. Feast sacrifices and processions mark transitions, victories, and seasonal cycles, intertwining sacred observance with communal life. Even in such ceremonies, the values of restraint, obedience, and endurance were reinforced, subtly shaping citizens through both reverence and expectation. Every citizen's existence was regulated by the state, from nourishment to marriage, yet fragments of personal expression survived in whispered stories and material remnants. Women, although excluded from military service, managed estates, trained in physical strength, and contributed to the cultivation of the next generation of warriors. Citizens' lives were governed by communal standards, yet inscriptions, grave markers, and artifacts suggest moments of individuality, private devotion, and subtle resistance to totalitarian uniformity. On battlefields across Greece, Spartan phalanxes demonstrated the discipline of generations, their victories etched into the chronicles of contemporaries and adversaries alike. Thermopylae and other campaigns exemplify the lethal coordination, cohesion, and endurance for which Spartan soldiers were famed. Military achievement was inseparable from daily life, as the entire society, training, upbringing, governance, was oriented towards sustaining a formidable army. Yet even these triumphs could not prevent the slow erosion of influence and relevance in a changing Greek world. Receding from prominence centuries later, the once feared city revealed structures perhaps too brittle to withstand evolving political and economic pressures. The dominance that relied on strict adherence to Lycurgan law and military excellence faltered under external conquest, internal tension, and the gradual decline of population. By the Hellenistic and Roman periods, Sparta had become a shadow of its former self, preserved in legend, ritual, and the enduring impression of discipline rather than in ongoing power. At present, ruins perch on hillsides, silent witnesses to a civilization that demanded conformity, strength, and devotion, leaving shadows of both admiration and enigma. Stones mark where citizens trained, lived, and governed, but the human voices behind them have faded, leaving only traces of a society that shaped its people so completely that their disappearance seems almost preordained. Among the stones, the echoes of disciplined footsteps remain, suggesting a society that disappeared as thoroughly as it once held power. The Harla Kingdom of Ethiopia. From hilltop to valley, stone ruins scatter across the highlands, each a silent witness to a civilization whose achievements and disappearance remain unanswered. Among the rocky plateaus and semi-arid plains of eastern Ethiopia, the Harla once built cities that dwarfed surrounding settlements in both scale and ambition. Their presence is recorded sparingly in the chronicles of neighbouring peoples and preserved more vividly in local memory, where tales of giants and skilled builders mingle with the archaeological traces left behind. Each stone, wall and terrace hints at labour, organisation and vision, yet the people themselves have vanished from historical record, leaving only questions etched into the landscape. The Harla, once rulers of vast settlements in eastern Ethiopia, left a mark on the land through architecture and organisation that hints at extraordinary skill. Flourishing from the first millennium CE until the late medieval period, they were remembered as the city builders, credited with constructing monumental enclosures, defensive walls, and platforms whose precision continues to puzzle modern archaeologists. Although the written record is sparse, local oral traditions and the remnants of their settlements indicate a society capable of complex planning, resource management, and long-distance coordination that exceeded expectations for the region. Enclosures, fortified walls, and ceremonial platforms endure, revealing the scale and ambition of builders long forgotten by history. Many of these structures are composed of massive stone blocks, carefully arranged without mortar, their stability surviving centuries of rain, wind, and seismic activity. Archaeologists note the geometric precision and layout of these sites, suggesting both defensive planning and ceremonial purpose. The spatial organisation hints at civic life structured around hierarchy and collective effort, where urban design reflected power, ritual, and community. Irrigation channels, terraced fields, and water storage systems testify to ingenuity in sustaining life, where arid soil and erratic rains could have easily ended human settlement. The Harla carved terraces into hillsides and constructed channels to guide seasonal rainfall to farmland and cisterns. These feats demonstrate a sophisticated understanding of hydrology, agricultural planning, and environmental adaptation. Even in harsh conditions, the population could cultivate crops and maintain settlements capable of supporting large communities, a testament to knowledge and foresight now largely lost to time. Shards of pottery, beads, and traces of exotic goods hint at a web of commerce that connected the Harla to distant regions. Evidence suggests they engaged in both local and long-distance trade, moving items such as ceramics, metal objects, and possibly spices or livestock products across the highlands and into the surrounding lowlands. This exchange allowed their settlements to flourish and points to a level of social complexity and external connectivity that challenges assumptions about isolated highland societies. The arrangement of monumental structures and communal spaces suggests leaders capable of organising labour and resources on a scale rarely seen in the highlands. Centralised authority, possibly exercised by elite families or councils, coordinated construction projects and regulated agriculture, trade, and ritual activity. Labour was likely mobilised in both voluntary and coerced forms, creating communities whose physical imprint endures long after the people disappeared. Such organisation implies political sophistication and an ability to marshal human effort to achieve lasting feats of engineering and urban planning. Carved stones, sacred enclosures, and ritual spaces indicate religious traditions and ceremonies that shaped daily life and reinforce social cohesion. Temples, shrines, and ceremonial platforms point to a spiritual dimension, where the sacred and the civic were intertwined. Oral histories describe rituals honouring ancestors and supernatural beings, sometimes attributing the city's creation to giants, blending tangible achievement with mythic interpretation. These practices likely reinforce social norms and collective identity, anchoring communities in both place and belief. By the late medieval period, settlements were abandoned, leaving only enigmatic ruins as clues to a society that had once thrived. Scholars debate the causes of decline. Environmental shifts, drought, soil exhaustion, social upheaval, or regional conquest could each have played a role. Whatever the combination of factors, the Harla Kingdom disappeared from human memory, leaving behind structures that defy easy categorization and legends that hint at magnitude and ambition. Recent excavations and surveys have begun to map city layouts and uncover artifacts, hinting at complexity and sophistication previously underestimated by historians. Aerial mapping, ground excavation, and analysis of stonework reveal patterns of streets, plazas, and defensive features, suggesting urban planning that balance function, hierarchy, and aesthetics. Each discovery adds depth to our understanding, yet simultaneously deepens the mystery of why a civilization so capable vanished, leaving only stone and legend. Even in decay, the remains of stone walls and terraces suggest a civilization that mastered its environment, yet vanished without record or explanation. The structures endure as both monument and riddle, offering tangible evidence of ingenuity while withholding the stories of the people who built them. Their cities rise from the highlands like echoes of ambition, impossible to ignore yet impossible to fully comprehend. The Harla Kingdom lingers in stone and memory, a vanished empire whose secrets may never yield to the hands of time. The Sea People's descent. Shattered coastlines, abandoned fortresses, and scorched towns mark the invisible path of raiders who appeared as suddenly as a storm. In the late Bronze Age, the Eastern Mediterranean was a network of thriving civilizations, cities fortified against ordinary threats, economies interconnected, and armies prepared for known enemies. Then came the Sea Peoples, a confederation of maritime raiders whose attacks toppled established powers, leaving devastation in their wake. The suddenness of their arrival and the ferocity of their campaigns created chaos that reshaped the region, yet their own identity remains one of history's enduring enigmas. Known only as the Sea Peoples, they struck across the eastern Mediterranean during the 13th and 12th centuries BCE, leaving historians to wonder who they were and from where they came. Egyptian records, particularly from the reigns of Ramesses II and Meneptah, describe them as a coalition of tribes or clans, united by maritime skill and a shared appetite for conquest. Hittite correspondence and Levantine inscriptions provide additional evidence of widespread disruption, yet no source reveals a definitive origin. They exist largely in fragments, names, reliefs and the scars of warfare, an absence that deepens their mystery. Their vessels, swift and seaworthy, allowed them to traverse hundreds of kilometers of open water, surprising civilizations that believed the sea could protect them. Archaeological studies suggest the Sea Peoples possessed ships capable of transporting both warriors and livestock, a combination of mobility and logistical planning that made coastal settlements vulnerable. Unlike conventional armies tied to land, they struck from the water, leveraging surprise and speed to overwhelm towns and cities that lacked preparedness for maritime assault. From the Nile Delta to Hittite strongholds, inscriptions and reliefs depict a relentless wave of assault, destroying settlements and toppling established powers. Egyptian reliefs at Medinet Habu show ships bristling with soldiers and archers, advancing in formation against fortified cities. Hittite texts recount invasions that left towns burned and populations scattered. The Sea Peoples' campaigns were not isolated skirmishes, they represented a sustained period of turmoil, altering the balance of power across the eastern Mediterranean and contributing to the collapse of multiple Bronze Age kingdoms. Egyptian pharaohs chronicled the devastation, showing both fear and strategic countermeasures, yet these records reveal only fragments of the raiders' presence. Ramesses III claimed victory over the Sea Peoples in naval engagements, though the inscriptions themselves are as much propaganda as history. The detailed depictions of battle demonstrate both the scale of threat and the sophistication of Egyptian military response, yet they leave unanswered questions. Who were these attackers? What drove them? And why did they strike with such intensity across multiple decades? Weaponry, fortifications and remnants of burned cities provide clues, but material traces are scarce, leaving gaps filled only by conjecture and fragmentary records. Excavations along the Levantine coast reveal layers of destruction dating to the period of the Sea Peoples' attacks. Arrowheads, sword fragments, and remnants of fort walls testify to violent encounters, yet no settlement attributed definitively to them has been uncovered. These fragments suggest movement and activity without revealing the larger social and political structure of the raiders themselves. Scholars suggest they may have emerged from Anatolia, the Aegean, or even further afield, yet linguistic and cultural evidence points to a confederation rather than a single people. Some names inscribed on Egyptian stelae resemble Aegean toponyms or ethnonyms, while others have no clear equivalent. It is possible the Sea Peoples were a coalition of refugees, displaced warriors, and opportunistic raiders, united by circumstance rather than heritage. Their identity remains speculative, a puzzle that challenges historians and archaeologists alike. By the early Iron Age, their movements cease in the historical record, leaving only ruins, inscriptions, and questions about why such a force vanished so completely. Some may have been absorbed into other populations, while others simply disappeared into obscurity. The sudden absence of the Sea Peoples mirrors the abrupt chaos they once wrought, leaving coastal cities to rebuild and maritime trade to recover, yet their origins, organization, and ultimate fate remain unresolved. Stories and myths preserved in Egyptian and Levantine texts hint at the lingering terror they inspired, shaping coastal defense and military strategy for generations. Fortifications were strengthened, navies expanded, and strategic alliances formed in response to the memory of those assaults. The Sea Peoples became both historical actors and symbols of unpredictable maritime threat, leaving an imprint not only on the physical landscape but on the strategic imagination of civilizations that survived their onslaught. The Sea Peoples remain a spectral presence in history, remembered for destruction yet invisible in identity, their legacy preserved in both stone and speculation. Their sudden arrival, devastating campaigns, and ultimate disappearance rendered them simultaneously concrete and ghostly, a people who shaped history while leaving almost no trace of themselves. Their ships may have vanished into the waves, but the echoes of their descent continue to ripple across the Mediterranean, unanswered and unresolved. The vanishing of the Maya heartlands. Temples and plazas lie empty, the echoes of ceremonies and markets erased by centuries of abandonment. Once thriving cities across the Yucatan, Payton and surrounding lowlands now sit silent, their stone monuments weathered and overtaken by jungle. Paths that carried traders, priests and commoners lie hidden beneath foliage, leaving only the skeletal outlines of plazas and pyramids. The sudden disappearance of entire urban centres has perplexed historians and archaeologists for generations, raising questions about how a civilization so sophisticated could vanish almost without trace. The Maya, masters of city-states scattered across the region, achieved architectural and cultural feats that rivaled any contemporary civilization. Between 250 and 900 CE, known as the Classic Period, their cities grew dense with monumental structures, palaces, and ceremonial complexes. Political power was divided among autonomous city-states such as Tikal, Copan, Palenque, and Caracol, each ruled by dynastic kings whose authority extended through both military strength and ritual observance. Trade networks connected them across hundreds of kilometers, exchanging obsidian, jade, cacao, and textiles, linking communities in a vast, interdependent system. Step pyramids rise above sun-bleached plazas, their construction precise and aligned with celestial events, reflecting both engineering skill and ritual significance. Temples, ball courts, and administrative buildings were carefully planned within complex city layouts, often centered around ceremonial cores. The placement of buildings corresponds with astronomical observations, demonstrating the integration of architecture, cosmology, and social order. Each city functioned as both a political hub and a sacred landscape, where rulers asserted legitimacy through construction and ceremony. Extensive terracing, raised fields, and water management systems reveal adaptation to fluctuating rainfall and support for dense urban populations. In areas prone to seasonal drought, the Maya engineered reservoirs and canals to collect and store water, sustaining agriculture and daily life. Intensive cultivation techniques allowed the support of tens of thousands of inhabitants within city walls and surrounding hinterlands. These innovations attest to a society that understood both environmental constraints and opportunities, shaping the land to feed and sustain its people with remarkable foresight. City-states were ruled by dynastic kings who wielded authority through ceremony, warfare, and control of trade networks, maintaining social cohesion across sprawling populations. Nobles, scribes, artisans, and warriors contributed to the functioning of the city, with hierarchies reinforced through ritual, architecture, and symbolic imagery. The intricate glyphic writing system documented events, lineage, and commerce, allowing rulers to codify authority and maintain historical memory. Yet even with such sophistication, the social and political systems proved vulnerable to disruption. Observatories and codices demonstrate their mastery of celestial movements, calendars, and mathematics interwoven with religious and civic life. Solar, lunar, and planetary cycles guided agricultural planning, ceremonial calendars, and political events. Mathematics allowed precise calendrical calculations, while astronomy reinforced the cosmic legitimacy of rulers. Knowledge was encoded in monuments, inscriptions, and codices, yet much of this understanding disappeared with the collapse of the southern cities, leaving only fragments for modern scholars to decipher. Carvings, murals, and ritual objects illuminate a society bound by cosmology, ancestor worship, and cycles of sacrifice and ceremony. Artistic expression intertwined with spiritual practice, reinforcing social norms and reflecting the beliefs that govern daily life. Sacred spaces, including pyramids, temples, and cenotes, were centers of ritual activity, while public art communicated ideology, myth, and power. The culture was one in which the divine and civic realms were inseparable, yet even such deeply rooted systems could not prevent the unravelling of entire cities. By the 9th century, many southern cities were deserted. Soil erosion, prolonged drought, internal conflict, and overpopulation may have combined to unravel these centres of civilization. Archaeological evidence shows widespread deforestation, the collapse of agricultural terraces, and abandoned water systems. Signs of warfare and fortification suggest social stress, while glyphic records gradually cease in the historical record. No single cause explains the disappearance. Instead, it appears as a convergence of ecological, social, and political pressures that overwhelmed the Maya heartlands. recent excavations have mapped city layouts, uncovered monumental inscriptions, and revealed clues about the daily lives of rulers, artisans, and farmers alike. LiDAR technology has unveiled thousands of previously hidden structures beneath dense jungle, showing an intricate network of roads, terraces, and residential areas. Artifacts, ceramics, and glyphic inscriptions provide insights into trade, governance, and spiritual life, yet they also underscore how much has been lost. Each discovery enriches understanding but deepens the sense of mystery surrounding the civilization's abrupt decline. Even in ruin, the precision of construction and complexity of societal systems hint at knowledge that survived only in stone, glyphs, and mystery. Pyramids and plazas stand as silent testaments to human ingenuity, while forests reclaim what once was meticulously organized. The Maya heartlands remain both monument and enigma, a civilization whose brilliance endures despite centuries of abandonment and whose disappearance continues to challenge scholars and captivate imagination. The Maya heartlands endure as silent witnesses to brilliance and disappearance, their secrets buried beneath jungle and soil, waiting for revelation yet guarding their final truths. The vanished realm of the Etruscans. The Etruscans built cities and shaped early Italy, yet centuries later their name survives mostly in fragments and rumour. Once dominant across central Italy, from the Tyrrhenian coast to the Apennine slopes, their presence left an indelible mark on urban design, art, and early Roman culture. Tombs, temples, and city walls endure as silent witnesses to a civilization whose origins and disappearance remain shrouded in mystery. Though Roman and Greek sources mention them, much of their history has been lost, leaving only tantalizing fragments that hint at a society both sophisticated and enigmatic. From the 8th to the 3rd century BCE, Etruria stretched across central Italy, where a people of unknown origin created thriving city-states that rivaled Greek and Phoenician influence. Cities such as Veii, Tarquinia, and Cerveteri were centres of commerce, religion, and political power. Their influence extended through trade networks and cultural exchange, and they played a formative role in shaping early Roman institutions, architecture, and ritual practice. Despite centuries of study, scholars debate where the Etruscans came from, some suggesting migration from the Aegean, others positing an indigenous Italic development. Walled settlements, paved streets, and monumental gates attest to an advanced understanding of urban design and civic engineering. Archaeological remains show carefully planned streets, acropolis-like centres, and drainage systems that reflect both practicality and aesthetic sensibility. Fortifications were built to withstand conflict, yet cities were also arranged to accommodate temples, markets, and gathering spaces, demonstrating a nuanced balance between defence, commerce, and ceremony. The physical imprint of Etruscan urbanism testifies to a society deeply concerned with order, function, and communal identity. Frescoed tombs, bronze sculptures, and intricate jewellery reveal a culture of refinement and artistic sophistication that has captivated historians for generations. Tombs were often elaborately decorated with scenes of feasting, dancing, and ritual, capturing daily life as well as spiritual ideals. Bronze figurines and finely crafted metal objects attest to exceptional skill in metallurgy, while jewellery and pottery demonstrate a refined sense of beauty and symbolism. Their art, often vibrant and dynamic, offers glimpses into values, beliefs, and social hierarchies that have been largely erased from written record. Ports and inland trade routes facilitated the movement of ceramics, metals, and luxury goods, connecting the Etruscans to the wider Mediterranean world. They maintained connections with Greece, Phoenicia, and the broader Italic peninsula, importing exotic items and exporting their own creations. Coins, amphorae, and inscriptions provide evidence of a thriving economy that supported urban populations and cultural production. Trade allowed Etruscan cities to flourish while also fostering a degree of cultural exchange that influenced art, religion, and technology. Temples, altars, and funerary practices suggest a society deeply attuned to the spiritual and the supernatural, where divination and ritual governed both life and death. Haruspicy, or the reading of entrails, and augury, the observation of birds, were practiced alongside ceremonies marking birth, marriage, and death. Temples dedicated to multiple deities served both civic and spiritual functions, reinforcing social cohesion and hierarchy. The sacred and secular were intertwined, and religious observance permeated civic life, embedding cosmology into the very fabric of their cities. Their language, written on tombs, urns, and inscriptions, resists complete translation, leaving only glimpses into thought, governance, and culture. While scholars have deciphered portions of the Etruscan script, much remains opaque. Names of rulers, gods, and ritual formulas survive, but the broader narrative of their literature, history, and ideology remains lost. The language itself stands as a testament to intellectual achievement and as a barrier to fully comprehending the civilization that created it. City-states, occasionally united under kings, eventually succumbed to Roman expansion, their governance and autonomy absorbed into a growing empire. By the late 3rd century BCE, Rome had incorporated much of Etruria, erasing independent political structures and integrating Etruscan practices into its own civic and religious systems. Despite the absorption, the Etruscan legacy persisted in architecture, engineering, and ceremonial practices, influencing the very foundation of Roman society. Yet as political entities vanished, so too did much of the cultural and historical record. Excavated necropolises and artifacts provide insight into daily life, belief and art, though much remains interpretive and fragmentary. Tombs reveal social stratification, ritual practice, and domestic life, while pottery, bronzes and tools illuminate commerce and craftsmanship. Even with centuries of excavation and analysis, the Etruscans remain partially hidden, their civilization glimpsed only through selective survival of material culture. Each discovery deepens knowledge while simultaneously reinforcing the sense of absence and enigma surrounding their history. An enduring riddle, the Etruscans shaped Rome and left echoes across the Italian peninsula. Their origins, culture, and disappearance still mysterious. Their cities, tombs, and artifacts stand as testament to human creativity and organizational skill, while the gaps in the record leave their story tantalizingly incomplete. The civilization that once dominated central Italy exists today mostly in shadow, remembered in influence but largely unseen in its full form. They vanished into history, leaving stone, bronze, and whispers of a civilization whose full story may never be known. The Rapa Nui decline. The colossal heads stare silently over the barren slopes, their eyes turned inland, witnessing centuries of human ambition and absence. Moai, some reaching over 10 meters in height, dominate the landscape of Easter Island, their presence both awe-inspiring and haunting. They were not mere monuments, but embodiments of ancestral power, reminders of a society that once orchestrated immense labour and complex organisation in one of the most isolated places on Earth. Today they endure as silent sentinels, their origins and the story of the people who created them intertwined with the island's mystery. The Rapa Nui, settled between the 9th and 12th centuries CE, established a society on this remote Pacific island that developed remarkable cultural and political complexity. With fewer than 20,000 inhabitants at its height, they organised themselves into clans that controlled territories, cultivated the land, and maintained elaborate ceremonial sites. Despite extreme isolation, the society thrived for centuries, constructing monumental statues, ceremonial platforms, and stone roads that required coordinated labour and communal planning, demonstrating ingenuity on a scale that belied their geographic remoteness. Carved from volcanic tuff at the Urano-Raraku quarry, the Moai were transported across the island through methods still debated by scholars. Teams of workers used ropes, wooden sleds, and carefully levelled paths to move these immense figures to ceremonial platforms known as ahu. Each statue represented an ancestor, a guardian, and a symbol of clan authority, linking spiritual reverence with social cohesion. The construction and transportation of Moai were monumental undertakings, reflecting both technical skill and intricate social organisation. Stone-walled gardens, lithic mulch fields, and complex irrigation systems reveal the Rapa Nui's sophisticated agricultural strategies. Cultivation on nutrient-poor volcanic soils demanded ingenuity, and the people adapted by creating terraced fields, rock mulches, and composting techniques to retain moisture and improve fertility. Sweet potatoes, taro, yams, and other crops form the dietary foundation, supplemented by seabirds, fish, and marine resources. These practices highlight a society that harmonized environmental knowledge with intensive labor to sustain a population under challenging conditions. Clans managed territories, coordinated labor for construction, and maintained ceremonial sites, forming a hierarchy that balanced ritual, work, and social cohesion. Chiefs or ariki led clan activities, overseeing the production of food, the maintenance of infrastructure, and the placement of moai. Religious authority intertwined with political power, with leaders legitimizing their rule through the veneration of ancestors and control over monumental projects. Social organization was tightly linked to spiritual belief, and community life revolved around shared obligations to kin, clan, and cosmos. Despite extreme isolation, the Rapa Nui navigated surrounding waters and utilized marine resources effectively. Canoes and fishing techniques allowed the collection of fish, shellfish, and seabird eggs, supplementing the island's limited terrestrial resources. Evidence of inter-island contact, though scarce, suggests that maritime knowledge persisted alongside agricultural expertise, reinforcing a society that understood both land and sea as essential to survival and cultural expression. AHU platforms, atop which moai were placed, served as ceremonial centers for ancestor veneration, connecting spiritual authority with social hierarchy. Rituals included offerings, feasting, and observances of sacred events, ensuring the presence of ancestors in daily life and political matters. The placement and alignment of statues reflect not only reverence, but a sophisticated understanding of spatial organization and community identity, embedding belief into the physical landscape. By the 17th century, signs point to dramatic environmental and societal pressures that contributed to the decline of Rapa Nui civilization. Deforestation, soil depletion, and resource scarcity undermined agricultural productivity, while evidence of toppling statues and internal conflict hints at social tension and competition among clans. Isolation compounded these stresses, leaving the population vulnerable to collapse, disease, and the gradual erosion of political and spiritual cohesion. Recent archaeological surveys and excavations reveal abandoned quarries, collapsed ahu, and remnants of dwellings, shedding light on daily life and organizational complexity. Studies of pollen, sediment, and charcoal indicate widespread deforestation and ecological change, while artifacts and tools offer insights into subsistence, craft, and trade. Each discovery illuminates both human ingenuity and vulnerability, emphasizing the fragile balance that sustained this island society before its decline. Even as the island bears scars of human activity and loss, the Rapa Nui story endures as a testament to creativity, adaptation, and unanswered questions. The moai remain, silent yet commanding, standing over empty fields and desolate paths as enduring witnesses to achievement and disappearance. The ingenuity and cultural depth of the Rapa Nui persist in stone, ritual, and archaeological traces, yet the precise causes and sequence of their decline remain partially obscured by time, wind, and silence. The moai remain frozen witnesses to an island civilization that rose, flourished, and faded, leaving only stone and silence to mark its passage.